Hello, everybody. Welcome. Today is February 15th, 2023. This is level 2, lesson 11. So first of all, welcome to everybody who's here. Welcome to everybody who's catching the archive later. I'm changing my lighting so you can see my face a little bit better with the sunlight in the background here. And, you know, I go over my lessons every time before I do class to prepare for class. And this is one of those times when, as I was going over my class lessons and my notes last night, I was really struggling. Like, this is me, like sitting in my bed with my headphones on, like looking at all these things, reading all these things. And I didn't have all of the articulation for it. I took off my headphones at a certain point and I was able to give voice to these thoughts. So this is another one of those instances where I will be making a big distinction between what my valid sharing and teaching from 10 or recorded from 10 years ago, valid perspective, but I don't want it to be miscontextualized for what we are going through right now, because I think that if you just took that information without any of the contextualization perspective that I'm giving to you right now on it, I think maybe it could be very blameful. And that's not my intention at all. Let me drink some of my wonderful electrolyte water here. So here are some of the things that I was trying. First of all, hi Trish, welcome. Good to see you, my dear. And of course, I'm going to read my notes over here. This lesson is called Planetary Ascension, Refinery of Light, Refinery of Personality Characteristics. So I talk a lot in this lesson from 10 years ago about the putis, those pesky occupiers of the interstices, the consciousness residues that are here on this membrane, which can also be known, the membrane of death, as I call it, might also be analogous to what people in this time and place call the astral realm or the lower astral realm. Or even Hat Teacher Charlie B made me aware of some of this stuff from Steiner, who was a teacher from 100 years ago, that I think it's called the 8th sphere, this encapsulation realm, kind of like a catch-all, like when you do the dishes in your sink, the little thing that catches the food from going down the drain, kind of like a sieve that is a catch-all for gross undigested stuff that you don't want to clog up the pipes. But I have to now give a much more accurate teaching in what the consciousnesses that are actually there are. And like, again, when I talk, you can already tell from my face and my, like, I'm slightly whatever, self-deprecating here. Okay, like when I talk about all these things and who I am and sharing uplift and insight in this world, you know, I speak from the perspective of being a math teacher, like a cosmic higher dimensional math teacher, with the complete innocence that I know I'm in this world where a lot of people are doing their math homework wrong, meaning the events of your life. Like, this is your math homework. The trajectory of your consciousness as you are flowing around this diagram of time and how your time energy centers are aligned on your body, and what events and realities you're aligned with and embedded within and experienced. All of that relates to, quote unquote, the math homework of the ideas, emotional states, and choices that you made throughout your life. And you're an accumulation of some things that came to you that are cultural, some things are ancestral. Those are things that aren't necessarily originating from you, but you respond to them. So many of them are grandfathered in. Some things are your direct personal choices. And some things are like, you know, 1 + 1 = 5. Like, that is not the right math at all. And the idea being, in a perfect, pristine system, if you die from doing the wrong math homework, that you would end up on the membrane of death and you would get your life review, and the red X's on your cosmic math homework would be evident to you, like, oh, wrong decision here, wrong decision here, wrong decision here. And then, of course, the unfurlment of your genetic sweater, the repositioning of your consciousness at the beginning of this time, like the starting line of the race, going back to the starting line and trying it again from a slightly different perspective or vector, with the intention of doing better the next time. And this is the totally appropriate life journey of someone like you, all of the beautiful people that are here in my class, You guys might be doing math homework that might have flaws in it, but you're not doing your math homework wrong on purpose. This is what I'm trying to get at. It is an insight that I really didn't have until within the past year. I've been here for 20 years on this particular cosmic assignment or mission, dealing with all sorts of different levels of consciousness. You guys who are embedded, alive, multicellular beings, and also dealing with the consciousness residues, those who have lived before, and also dealing with negative thought entities that might be defined as demons who have never lived before. And it's only been within the past year that I came upon the very real insight, some of these guys are doing their math homework wrong on purpose. And that is a different category. So being a well-intentioned yet ignorant experiencer and co-creator of reality is a completely different level or categorization of mistakenness than someone who does things wrong in reality on purpose, knowing that the events of their life are adding up towards death and self-destruction. And that, it was mind-blowing, brains shooting out of my ears level of mind-blowing to have this thought. I literally was like getting into the bathtub and like, I thought, maybe some of these entities are doing their math homework wrong on purpose. My brain exploding. Because again, I come from a place where there are no lies. I'm talking about Aurora. I come from a higher dimensional reality where there are no lies, no liars. Everyone is completely authentic. The idea of lying is like a very silly, unfunny farce. The idea of hiding your intentions, also worthy of ridicule. I clutch my pearls. Worthy of ridicule, an unfunny farce, and very silly in many ways. So it took me a little bit of time, like basically 2 decades of being within this flawed system here and responding to the needs of, again, well-meaning but ignorant people who are in this flawed system, but then recognizing that there are some entities that are in the flawed system and entities who are hovering around the edges or peripheries of the flawed system, but exploiting those flaws, who do their math homework wrong on purpose. Charlie B is saying, it's like, this is a quote, it's like they want to self-destruct, but they don't know how. It's a quote from me. And that's very truthful. So the ones who are doing, and thank you for quoting that, reflecting that back to me. Good reminder. Those who are either embodied consciousness entities or non-embodied consciousness entities who do their math homework wrong on purpose, there is some level of self-destruction there. And so everything that I'm going to talk about today, we really have to talk about, have a much more mature and accurate conversation from my innocence and idealism, because what of 10 years ago, as I finish my sentences, trying not to be so fragmented, what I wrote and spoke about and recorded 10 years ago that is worthy and good information for that time, I have found to be not applicable in every situation, because what I talk about are some of these things. First of all, the concept of you as an emanator of different levels of frequency, some of which are food for pooties. And those foods would be things that are about grief, sadness, self-recrimination, sorrow, anger, like these heavier, lower vibration type of energies and emotional states that I would say are not the defining characteristic of anything that we come here to experience that is part of the divine plan of divine intelligence. So when I talk about that lovely brochure of divine perfection and what our life experience was supposed to be like as we agreed to it to come here, the idea was that we would be experiencing unconditional love. Where's my piano? Love tone. I am not set up on my music. Sounds like percussion. I don't know if you can hear it, but the love tone. We were set up to come here and experience the love tone, which is this equal sending and receiving, or rapport, reciprocity, and mutualism with God consciousness, light itself, the sun and the stars. And that's at the heart. Like as I was listening to my recording last night, I'm like, okay, like I could just cut out half of what I have in my notes and just really focus on that stuff, which is mostly what I focus on in the Path of Light curriculum. And I love to talk about those things, and I love to talk about the sense of ideals. And I think that that's really important. So on the positive sense, focusing on the rapport that we have with the sun and the stars. The sun is a math student, and all of the stars doing math homework to their best ability. And that means reality creation. This is everything I teach about in Path of Light. P.S. If you're not on board, if you haven't checked it out, I invite and encourage everyone to do so. It's an amazing curriculum that is basically about these expanding time loops, expanding and contracting time loops that come not only from one star, but from the entirety of each star. When you are overlapping at the singularity, you see them as like a pulsing musical oscillation that represents different versions of reality. Like, let's try this version of reality. Was that the right one? I don't know. No, it's not quite right. So let's change it, shift it slightly. That's how it's supposed to be. So the sense of it is very righteous and appropriate to be privileged to be in existence as consciousness. I am conscious, the sun is conscious, particles of light are conscious, on a journey of awareness, which is self-exploration, the externalization of self, so that one may fly around within one's creation and have the experience of learning. So again, it can be totally righteous, good, noble, courageous to have areas of ignorance or non-knowing. That is totally cool. And even the sun, which is an enormous genius and magnificent, like magnitude, big, very, very big, very, very smart, amazing and impressive level of consciousness. There are things that the sun and the stars don't know. That's beautiful. That is even like saying one of the greatest composers like Mozart, that there might be music that Mozart doesn't know. How exciting. And then Mozart would be like, oh, goody, like I get to learn this symphony. Let's learn it and play it. That's the sun and the stars. But I want to contrast that now with some of these differently motivated levels of consciousness. And in the recording from 10 years ago, you know, I intentionally use non-emotionally charged language. Instead of calling the consciousnesses that are on the membrane of death demons, which is very loaded with emotion, loaded with judgment, loaded with a ton of religious connotations, calling them putis is helping us to have a conversation without so much of that heavy emotional charge. But I think that first I have to give a good teaching. I don't know if I've ever done this. Let's categorize. Who's on the membrane of death? Who's there? Knock, knock. Who's there? People on the membrane of death. People on the membrane of death. Who? Okay, so who's on the membrane of death? First of all, to define, the membrane of death is not supposed to be the membrane of death. It is supposed to be a perfectly clear transitory point that no one ever goes through because everybody ascends. This is the true brochure of reality. So even defining this area that is a separation or boundary between worlds as a place of death is contextually relevant only to a dysfunctional system, because when that system is functional, nothing is there. So you don't, it would be like the membrane of nothing there, or the place that nothing ever goes to because we all do our math homework so perfectly. How can we do our math homework so perfectly? Let me get what I always customarily show you here. From your inner Christ crystalline vision, that when you have this inner eye totally activated, it is your eye of time that you use to perceive time. If you are a good math student acting in good faith, like with your best efforts, and you see what are the ramifications of what you are doing in time, and you're like, wow, if I do that, I'm going to die. I don't want to die, therefore I shall not do that. That is how that was, according to the brochure, a place where no one would ever be, no consciousness would ever go, no consciousness would ever have to go there. There is literally nothing to explore there other than the answer that you did something wrong and that you're not supposed to be there. Like if you end up there, really the only thing that you learn is, hey kid, like you're not supposed to be here, get out, get to where you're supposed to be. But the problem is that it has become normative for us to experience. We're in a world of death, and there's all of these residues that are consciousness residues that are in that place where consciousness is not actually supposed to go. Different categories of consciousnesses, how they got there. So there's the originals. We can call them the originals. The zeroth dimension as the source, as God self, that is analogous to the biblical God, where it says that these angels fell from heaven. I am categorizing it like this, instead of like they fell because they were bad and they were wrong and they were evil and all these other types of religious and anthropocentric viewpoint judgments. I see them with not an apologist. I'm not a demonic apologist. I see them as having an actual positive moment of self-realization when flawed personality characteristics and event states recognize that they don't belong at the zeroth dimension. That is this infinity point. This is the state of being, of allness, of infinity. And when there's something at infinity that should not be in existence, and it actually wakes up for a moment, it's like, I'm here, I exist, but technically I shouldn't exist because I am flawed. Therefore, I should go into a state of non-existence. That's what, in the positive sense, an item or organism that is at the zeroth dimension, that has that recognition, and then says, I'm going to go away from existence into a state of non-existence, is a positive. These are the originals, and their original religion or faith or expression of devotion to God, big. Honoring of divine intelligence and presence was to non-participate. Like, you're God, I'm paraphrasing for these guys. You're God, I'm a flawed, whatever, putti to be. I'm getting out of here. I'm going into a state of non-existence. And ideally, they would have instantaneously gone into a state of pure entropy without any of the histrionics that we've experienced of many, many millennia of suffering. That's what good negative entities would do. But somewhere along the line, they became apostate, or going away from their original devotion to and recognition of God, where they're like, yeah, I know I made this choice to go away from God and to go away from existence, and I'm halfway to entropy, but then, I changed my mind. Oops, I changed my mind. And now I'm deciding to turn it all around, and kind of like, a cartoon character kind of like goes off the cliff, and then their feet keep going, but they haven't quite fallen yet. Those are these originals. Their feet dangling, going like this for an uncountable amount of time in hyperspace reality. That's been the real problem. That has been the real thing that is almost inconceivable to me, because, of course, it would be the refutation or denial of paradise. Like literally going to entropy for those things that should not exist is a paradise state of stillness and non-being and unpressured existence without the need for any kind of machinations. The desire to keep their feet going and keep themselves kind of in an aloft state is what has led to an enormous amount of suffering in their existence, in trying to artificially extend their existence, and in creating what I call a pyramid scheme, which is the original pyramid scheme, which is the economy of hell, which is a very real fake economy that our real economy is reflective of. Those words, I'm certain, confused you. So the economy of hell, although I legitimize it by calling it the economy of hell, is actually in orderliness and an organization of something that is totally illegitimate. So I don't want to legitimize it by contextualizing it and saying, oh yes, the economy of hell. But when I originally did that recording 10 years ago, I wanted you to recognize that everything that you're looking at in the present or former state of the human paradigm, the dollars or euros or gold coins that we use here in this time place, that system is reflective of its originators that are not us. we, the experiencers and embedded users of, or those who are exploited within that system of dollars, euros, and gold coins, we didn't actually set it up, or humans did not set it up for ourselves. It was set up for us by those originators on the membrane of death that made the membrane of death a place, place that they could occupy when it is meant to be a transitory place. So big takeaway, it is meant to be a transitionary place from here to there, from point A to point B. The astral realm is not supposed to be a place where consciousnesses go and hang out for tens, millions, however many eons of years, or an uncountable amount of time in hyperspace. And the astral realm, to the human viewpoint, is looked at as a place where thought forms reside. So you are not merely a thought form, you have a biological structure, but you also can be a thought form. Like if your biological structure gets smashed by a Mack truck, we still remember you. You're like, oh, I remember that guy, Joe Schmo, and he wore a blue sweater and his dog was named whatever, Trigger. His horse was named Trigger. He's not here anymore, but I remember him. The memory that you have and the emotional energy that you imbue that memory with creates a little residue and upholds a little residue of Joe Schmo in the astral realm, which is a realm of pure thought forms. And ideally, we resolve, process our grief over our loved ones, and then allow their memory and their spirit to go onward. Like the love remains, but we do not have to continually revivify their thought form in keeping it alive for forever. You don't want that. This is so big. People think, you can tell I'm getting itchy. I'm getting hives when I think about this. People think that living on the astral realm and having other people remember you means you stay alive forever. No, sorry, that is not the real stay alive forever. The real stay alive forever is when you become a coherent light being, when you're actually able to transcend the membrane of death. So any aspect of your consciousness that gets to the membrane of death is in a place where it's actually not supposed to be. And you don't want it to be there eternally. That's actually not a good thing. But you do want to remember with love your dead grandma or cat or friends or family members that have passed on, but not in the sense of wanting to keep a spiritual residue or a ghost or some astral aspect of themselves alive, which, no offense, sometimes people want to do this for their own personal reasons of grieving, to think, I don't want to think of my cat as permanently gone and like kaput and no longer there. I want to imagine that my cat is like floating around someplace and that I can one day float around with her and we'll have a joyous reunion. And you will have a joyous reunion, but you will have a joyous reunion when you are pure light, when my cat no longer has 4 paws and a tail, and when I no longer have 2 eyes and a nose and a mouth, but we will meet again at that infinity point that is the place of true eternity. So this is big in healing from whatever grief or loss you've ever experienced. I love you, and I've experienced my own grief and loss. So there's no judgment of you on this at all. Grief can cause a type of real sadness and psychosis. Again, we never experienced grief when we lived before death was ever invented. We didn't have loved ones that we lost. You get it? Like, you didn't lose people when they died. They went into an ascended place that is literally still interactive with and visible to us. That is this, I call it like a floating city. I know I'm being very fragmented and nonlinear in my presentation today. That is when you no longer walk on the Earth's surface with your feet making a circuit here, but you're still tethered to the events of Earth, and you still require a constant in-stream of data, light, information, sustenance from this particular star. So you're now at stage 2 of ascension, which is hovering, but circulating around the planet, but having to constantly be in line of sight connection to the sun. That in the past, before death was invented, everybody ascended, everybody made it through that wormhole. Nobody's consciousness residue went to the membrane of death. When they transitioned or changed state, you didn't lose them. Like, they're not lost, they're right there. I could see them right there. And they're still very, very much a part of your life. but they are not in the same level of density or state of matter that you are in. And this is the brochure. This is how life is like in the brochure. But everything really changed when death was instead of invented, let's say the area that is the no man's land, the no person's land, the place where no one is supposed to go, began to be explored and occupied. So first you had the originals that went to the membrane of death that said, oops, I changed my mind. I decided I didn't want to go into a state of non-being. I actually wanted to somehow stay being in some way, all right? Then you've got two other different categories, because those guys never existed as humans. They never had biological cellular bodies as we do here. They never came into being. They never came into matter. They simply would be considered ephemera or abstractions that are thought forms that were supposed to go into non-being, that are semi in existence, but have never had physical corporeal existence. Then we have the two basic categories of those of us whom have had physical, materialistic, embodied existence. And some of those guys went onto the membrane of death in these levels of self-destruction intentionally. So those are the ones who did their math homework wrong, intentionally wrong. And I also say that this is like, to be alive, this is symphony of life. I'll get to your question in a moment. In order to be alive, you agree to play certain music and abide by the musical formalism of the grammar. Gonna play that music, gonna stay alive. And I'm doing the best I can. If my pinky slips, then oops, I hit the membrane of death. I'm innocent, I swear. I'm innocent and I did mistakes and I ended up on the membrane of death. Boss, give me another chance. No problem, kid. Very different than when I talk about the guys that came, let's say, from Mars. It's a good example. The civilization that was on Mars made its entire mania or obsession this idea of creating an artificial Merkaba that is, I thought, was supposed to be a way that they wanted to send themselves back home to the source to get back to light speed, but could also have been considered the ultimate form of self-destruction when they don't consider death to be a self-destruction, but they consider it to be a continuation of a simulation of life. Instead of being like, yep, I'm gonna go back to source. Maybe they were like, I'm gonna go to the membrane of death in such a way that my death can never be resolved. And then I will float there in an indeterminate state for forever, kind of gaming the system, exploiting a perceived vulnerability in the structure of reality, which again, mind blown. To me, the idea that anything would be like, I know, instead of doing my math homework correctly and putting my consciousness energy where it is supposed to be, I'm going to create a very, very deformed time machine, deform time, get smushed or spaghettified or somehow stretched through the singularity point in a way that, like a turd that will never flush, an unresolvable time paradox. And then I'll be able to float around in an indeterminate state for forever. Like you can tell, hopefully, by the facetiousness of my face, that is something I would never think about to do. I would never do that. I would never advise anybody to do that, but I've had to come to the assessment, like, I think some of these guys did that. So that even speaks to my presumptions in innocence of 10 years ago, the sense that these guys, of course, and gals, or non-gender specific consciousnesses, thought that this would be a positive or self-serving exploit. This is when we get to the sense of, what are their motivations? Do they really want to self-destruct? Or do they not want to self-destruct? Because this has to do with egos and ego characteristics having longevity or not having longevity. So longevity means you keep on existing. There are some parts of you that should keep on existing. There are some parts of your grandmother or your cat that should keep on existing. The true, untarnished, realist, most divine aspects of who and what they are. But let's say your grandma was like, whatever, a bit nitpicky, or was like, brush your hair, shine your shoes, like you're never good enough, like some grandmas that are harsh in that way. Like that's not the real grandma. That's not her. That's not the real her. But those are some negative personality characteristics that were part of the recipe of her life. Those aspects do not go onward, but the true aspect of her that represent the divine nature of love in the cosmos do have longevity. And this is just the truth of what happens on the membrane of death and with our dead loved ones. But there are some personality characteristics that are so flawed that they're like, yep, I know I'm flawed. I know I'm bad. I know I'm wrong. And I want to still last for forever. I want the wrongnesses of me to still last for forever, which is itself a flaw. Do you get it? So an unflawed being would say, I appear to be flawed. I should cease to exist immediately, as opposed to a flawed being who would say, I appear to be flawed. I should continue to be flawed and maintain my existence at the expense of anything and everything, because this gets back to some of these concepts of, are they really trying to self-destruct? Do they really want to go to entropy? Do they really want to get resolved? Or do they just want to keep on like the cartoon character, kind of hovering in space, not quite yet plummeting over the cliff, and continually maintaining their artificial semi-existence? That all of those circumstances are very, very different than you or me. Good students. We are good students. Let's say I walk out one morning like to get the mail, just walking out with my coffee and my bathrobe and my fuzzy slippers, and a Mack truck smashes over me while I'm going across the street. That's not intentional. I didn't want that to happen. It was an accident. I end up on the membrane of death and I am resolved. I do not hang around on the membrane of death for forever. I end up there, get my math homework. Well, here's your, like the plumber, like when the plumber goes inside of your house, it's like, well, here's your problem right here. All right. Like, here's a problem right here, lady. Like, you shouldn't have made that decision to go across the street at that exact moment. And you're like, yep, you're exactly right. I shouldn't have made that decision. Let me have another chance. Let me try it again better and get another chance to try it again better. It's very, very different than some of these time experiments gone horribly awry, which I had chalked up to the sense of ineptitude. They're so silly and so inept. They built a crap time machine. They don't know anything about how time works. They have all of these time paradoxes, because of course I know about how time works and I know about like time. So a time paradox puts you in this endless like pushing and pulling and pushing and pulling and pushing and pulling and time loops that keep going forever and ever and ever. It's not a fun, positive, happy thing at all. It actually does represent ineptitude. But maybe to some of these consciousnesses, they're like, I know I'm going to make a totally inept time machine, and I'm going to get that, on my MacBook when the computer is in conflict, you get the spinning beach ball of death. Like when the beach ball is spinning, like your computer can't do anything. It's just locked in, like hum-de-dum-dum, like still spinning, nothing's happening. Oh, well, there's nothing I can do. I think that they were hoping maybe to create some kind of a unresolved or unresolvable Gordian knot of time, an endlessly convoluted, self-conflictory time paradox that would supposedly sustain in semi-existence their consciousnesses. So these are, again, consciousnesses like you and I that have had some level of existence or embodiment or physicality form, not the ones that went away from the source originally, that never were in physicality form, but those who were in physicality form. And I say that they are like musicians who not only played the wrong notes and then ended up on the membrane of death, but literally smashed their guitars on stage. The way that some of these like self-destructive rock stars are like smashy, smash, smash in a blaze of not glory, but a blaze of self-destruction, and then ending up there. Okay, but this relates heavily. You guys haven't smashed your guitars and you're trying everything you possibly can not to get hit by a Mack truck in the morning or at any time of day. Let's talk about cloning, because this is very big. Cloning as an agenda has been going on for a very long amount of time. It's gone on in very different, many places or time places or parallel dimensions. As it is practiced here, cloning is very different than the sense of like creating a baby like an extra baby, and then having that baby have to grow to adulthood as like an off-growth progeny of the original parent. Different than that. I'm talking about cloning as an artificial container that consciousness can be kind of yoinked out of your original container and put into this artificial container in adulthood. So maybe your original body might have been whatever, 35 years old, and to be able to create a 35-year-old analog cellular structure based on the same genetic code, and then be able to do something that is a transference of consciousness. You could call it consciousness transfer, soul transfer. I sometimes use the word portage because that is the word for a canoe. When a canoe is in one river and then you can't go any further, you have to do portage, which means you get out and carry it, get out of the river, bring your canoe out of the river. Everybody carries the canoe and puts it in the next river that is portage. So this is, again, a form of technology. None of this is natural, because when it is natural, what happens is you don't have to have portage. Your soul goes where you're supposed to go, into the container you're supposed to go into. And the container you're supposed to go into in natural law is hardly ever, not ever, if never, is not going to be an exact copy of the one that you just left. Like that cloning is actually an aberration, and it goes against the sense of orderliness of divine consciousness and the way that the structure of reality is built. So yeah, it's against consciousness to say like, I like this dog. I like this dog. Let's save some cells from this dog, freeze them cryogenically. And then when this dog dies, let's make a new dog that's based in exactly the same genetic heritage as this dog, and maybe it'll have the same personality characteristics and all of that. That is also an aberration, something you should not do, or this person, or this sheep, or this organism, or whatever it is. Let's make more of it. But also, what about this? Hey, my dog is looking old. Let's make a new dog body container. And then let's do soul portage so that my dog never actually has to die, that it can jump out of this body, never have a life review, and then jump directly into this new body. And then I can keep on hugging my dog and never have to go through the loss and the grief. We're going to hack the system, exploit the system, avoid the difficulties of death and loss, and still have everything that we want. There are literally like whole segments of society that are the upper echelons, but actually spiritually lower echelons that have been trying to do stuff like this. Why do I have to bring all of this stuff up? Like, why do I have to speak about this and refer to it like, why are we looking at poop under a microscope here and just determining the undigested aspects of corn that are in it? I'm sorry to be so crude in my analogy here. And the answer is because I, in the original teaching from 10 years ago, said things like, don't be food for the pooties, with the very simplistic and reductionist proscriptions that if you just kept yourself in a state of love and above, through spirituality and self-cultivation and positive practices, that you would not be chompable. But I got to tell you guys, I did all of those practices, all of those beautiful levels of spirituality, and I got chomped, like over this past 2 years, quite a lot, by something that does not respect these boundaries, where you're supposed to be, again, if you are at love and above, you're supposed to be inedible. But just as there is a technology that can do soul transfer artificially from one container to another, there is technology that can take energy that is this beautiful, shining, light, love, divine energy, and kind of squash it over, diminish it, bring it down in its frequency, to sully it, to degrade the quality of the energy that is supposed to be non-degradable into something that can then be consumed by these lower level astral entities. This is totally against the rules, is what I'm trying to say. They're not, quote unquote, playing by the rules, quote unquote, and that is totally unacceptable. So if you followed my teaching from 10 years ago, you'd be like, dun, dun, oh, I'm listening to Aurora, keep my vibration in, a love vibration in, everything's great because no one can chomp me. And they're like this on the membrane of that. Snicker, 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 zap, zap, zap. Oh, it looks like your beautiful love frequency has now become degraded, and now I'm going to eat you. And the zap, zap, zap is not usually something that is done like with a little thing like that. It's actually being done to our whole entire planet with these different frequency arrays, some of which are satellite based, some of which are like your 5G, some of which are Bluetooth. There are many different frequency disruptors around us whose sole purpose is to bring love frequency down into a degraded and more edible level. And again, this is very, very different than any other time of spiritual attainment, when the answer is meditate harder. Oh, some demonic putti is chomping away at you. Well, just meditate harder. That would be the valid approach to 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, even 500 years ago. Within the past 100 years, and definitely within the past 50 years, and definitely within the past 20 years, if you act in that way, it's so simplistic and reductionist, you will be at a great disadvantage, because you actually need to do much more than just keep your vibe high and stay loving, because they are not playing fair. So I'm going to speak to this question, and I'm going to get to all the other questions too. Adam, thank you for being here, says, can we perceive these zaps? I know that you can. And the zaps come from a variety of different places. They come from giant screen TVs. If you have one of those in your household, you might have felt it, where you're walking along, dun, 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 I'm at a high low vibration, and all of a sudden just walking into the room where some of this activity is happening from one of these big, flat screen TVs. Doesn't even matter whether it's the evening news or a Teletubbies show, just the frequency of what is emanating from that apparatus can be enough to disrupt the healthy functioning of your love apparatus and bring it down to something less than love. So that would be like saying, here's my love apparatus, and these are spinning bicycle wheels. They're going, they're spinning, they're whirling, they're swirling, they're making figure eights. Oh, I'm in love, everything is perfect. And then walk into the room with the big giant TV screen going, and it makes the chakras wibble wobble. And that wibble wobbling, again, is in many ways technologically incepted, and in some ways beyond just your mere willpower as a spiritual aspirant, which is why it's disempowering for me to be reductionist and say, meditate harder. That would be me being a total bully. Like the bully is punching you in your face. And instead of me being like, oh, that's unfair and it's not supposed to be happening, be like, oh, just meditate harder. Like I'm not doing that. That's why I literally had to sit there in my pajamas last night and be like, let me analyze what is not relevant for our present circumstance, so that I can give the most accurate and empowering teaching that I possibly can to each one of you, because it is essential for you to recognize what are the things that are genuinely within your power, that are genuinely appropriately part of quote unquote schoolhouse for learning, the brochure of life, schoolhouse for learning, one room schoolhouse. But when these things happen, when just being in a room with the television on is enough to be able to make you food for demon pooties, then that has nothing at all to do with whether you are a spiritual aspirant or not. It has nothing at all to do with whether you belong behind the velvet rope in the VIP lounge known as higher dimensional or heavenly reality. And the whole idea is that there are these frequency boundaries that exist to keep the poop out, so that only those beings and personality characteristics that are supposed to be at that level of extremely refined consciousness are able to get up there. That's how it's supposed to be. Brochure, supposed to be. So this is, again, the very, very first thing that's written in my notes here is planetary ascension, refinery of light, refinery of personality characteristics. Yes, in a pristine system. That's what planetary ascension is, and that's what we are all experiencing here. But I really have to speak to or acknowledge the sense of technology that is being used to artificially create food for these pooties, because I also speak extensively in my notes that basically, if we all did our jobs and did beautiful levels of self-cultivation, really building the spiritual muscles, there would be nothing extra that would be a lower vibrational, emotional state for these other things to feed off of. And that is all accurate in the sense if it were a pristine system and if everybody was playing by the rules. If everybody's playing by the rules, you're like, imagine a big giant muscle person. You're like, oh, I built my muscles and I'm 100% love and you can't knock me off of my balance center, right? And then that would be it. You would be at that level of attainment. We would all be there already if these unfair practices weren't going on. If this was a fair system, we would already be at that level of ascension or personal attainment. A lot of unfair things have been happening against the brochure. So what is happening is, imagine the biggest, strongest muscle person and some kind of magnetic tractor beam that is instead pulling them to the side, pulling them off their center and kind of pulling them, out of balance, out of that love rapport, and then bringing them over into anger, fear, sadness, hatred, all these other things. So I have to speak to this because in my notes from 10 years ago, I also talked about what I said was planetary quarantine, which we can also perceive as sequestration. When you are sequestered, we sequestered the jury and kept them away from everyone else. I refer to this planetary sequestration of human thought forms being unworthy of connecting to larger galactic creative society because of humans emanating thought forms and creating a dream existence that is based in fear or negativity or hatred or any of those things. Again, reductionist and flawed of me to say that when a lot of those frequencies are being created not by you or your lack of willpower, but you are being exploited, and they're being created in spite of your willpower, in spite of your giant muscles, in spite of all of the love and self-attainment and cultivation that you have done on your journey to be a real spiritual master. In spite of that, they keep on pulling real individuals with attainment over, like making the chakras wibble wobble and siphoning energy off. That is technically something that is not supposed to happen or be allowed to happen. And the idea that it is happening is a complete aberrance, like it's an unfairness. And for them or anyone else to be like, oh, like just build more muscles. Like you could have the muscles this wide and they would still do it because what they're doing is using a form of technology or frequency warfare to make these things happen. So all of this is antithetical to the sense of these negative entities, consciousness residues, being like the scavengers, bottom feeders that are meant to go around in the cosmos. Like if you say that everything has a divine purpose and a divine role that it plays within the larger ecosystem of energy and consciousness, these scavengers would play the role of, like, I see you've got some extra fat, like you've got some extra fat around the middle. I'm going to eat away at your extra fat, and then you're going to learn not to be fat, right? And nothing, in my notes, I say this, and I say this truthfully here too, nothing of what I'm saying here is meant to be fat shaming at all. So not for people that have a larger body size, and also not of the sense of within your body, whether you have fatty deposits on an organ, like on a liver or on, some other place, or fatty deposits within your heart, anything that is preventing energy and blood from flowing in optimal states of health. Because that is how I originally presented all of this, as the putis being undigested emotional residues analogous to your fat in your body being undigested emotional residues. So in a pristine system, yes, your fat on your body is directly an outgrowth of undigested emotional experiences. I talk about this also in the recorded lessons, that what you need to do is eat mindfully, guard your food, and then you will not become fat or out of shape, because 100% of the calories, like I'm chewing, it tastes so good. Guys, I had a really beautiful almond flour crust pizza for my lunch right before I started this show. So I'm like, I'm chewing. All of those calories are going directly to support me, my true nature, the characteristics that are the real me, 100% going towards the real Aurora, and 0% of those energies or calories going towards grumblings, dissatisfactions, errant thoughts, me being angry at others, ashamed, guilt, remorse, any of those things. Like, I agree with this from 10 years ago, but it's too simplistic in this battle right now to say simply guard your mind, eat your food in mindfulness, and then your body will be the right shape. Because I also talk about this, the sense that after you ingest food, that something can literally take your joy out of your intestines. This is what we are facing right now. There are nanoparasites that are in human bodies right now. Some of them are in the digestive tract, and they take caloric energy against your willpower. And some of them are in the blood supply, and they take oxygen against your willpower, and they act as pathogens. These are non-natural entities, and these are 100% what I call it sky poop. They are aerosolized, sprayed in the atmosphere, sky pollution, because this will be in air quotes, because this will be on my YouTube over here. So we don't use certain words, but the sky poop that gets inside of people, and also the subcutaneous lollipops that some people eat that are all related to these sky poops, that those things are all forms of technology that are parasitic or have a parasitic consciousness that are being deployed, that in many ways supersede the simplistic prescription from me to just, A, eat your food in mindfulness. A, don't feed your anger, get up to the level of love. Do you understand? I would hate me. Oh, not hate me. I would be extremely disappointed in me and angry at me if I saw my teaching from 10 years ago and was like, that is not appropriate to what's going on right now at all. And that person is kind of, it's like a blame the victim type of thing. It would be very, very simplistic. And it would be like saying that you're not working hard enough, or that you're not strong enough, or that you're not willpowery enough, or it's all within your own powers. Hold on a minute here. Because on the one hand, life is within your powers, but on the other hand, some things are not within your powers. This is very, very tough, like a tough situation where we want the story to be the ruby slippers. I had the ruby slippers all along. It turns out I was empowered all along, and all I had to do was use my quantum observership, and then I could get rid of all the sky poop, and could get rid of all the demons, and could get rid of all the pooties, and everything was great, and I lived in heaven happily ever after. But that right now, that it appears as if there are certain aspects of the journey that do not originate from our observership and do not respond to our observership. That it would be the reductionist thing. If I'm kind of telling you like, oh, just bootstrap yourself on up and stop letting these guys bully you. But you're like, but wait, Aurora, there's all these unfair things that are happening. So I think that it's really important to recognize that we live in this moment right now when technology is being deployed that has the capacity to siphon your food energy off from you. Just like a tapeworm in your belly is like, yum, I'll take your carbohydrates and make a giant worm out of it, and you will be very skinny and starving. These demonic putti consciousnesses go into the intestines of humans, and they are there. And that's why so much of what I teach about is like an anti-parasite protocol for what's going on in your intestines, and an anti-parasite diet, because they act very much as parasites in taking the very real love energy. So you could be like, I'm eating my lunch in a total state of love, but I'm in a 5G or Bluetooth environment with all the sky poop that's been sprayed, and the nanites that are in my tummy are trying to take this love energy away from me and trying to bring me and my experience away from that attainment state of love. So all of these things, like, I hope that I'm really getting across to you, a proportion of what I taught 10 years ago is still valid, and it is valid for a pristine system. But I think that a lot of it is something that is only partially, only a partial truth for the world that we presently live in. So I want to talk a little bit also about cloning as it is being practiced right now by some of the people that are in human government, religion, whatever they would be known as, people of notoriety or celebrities. It's been recognized for a long time that these practices are going on. They incinerate the original. And this is what makes the experience like a type of suicide or self-destruction, with that consciousness no longer being tethered to its proper body form in reality. So the way that they do cloning of adults here for these purposes of longevity of consciousness and also behavioral control by some of these wealthy or well-connected people is you have two chambers, kind of like, whatever, a magic box or magic whatever place that you get into, and then the magic box number 2. Magic box number 1, you get into there, and what happens inside of there is a vaporization experience of the original body form, similar to what happened when the bombs were very tragically deployed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The energy that was released in those explosions was so instantaneous and so intense that it caused those body forms and those souls to instantaneously change state from a physical, solidified, your states of matter, solid matter, into something that is a vaporized plasma vapor instantaneously, without going through any of the intermediary stages that would involve self-reflection and the realization of the experience of death. And this is very similar to when I talk about cancer as an entity and as a genetic invader. The crab nebulans, or the occupants of a particular civilization or organized levels of being, because they're not civilized. Sorry, I can't say that they're civilized. They're very uncivilized. But these groups that existed around a particular star, that around the year 1000, our calendar time, became a supernova, which is kapow, a big giant instantaneous expansion that is a similar type of flash event to what happened with Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that vaporized that entire planet and that entire non-terrestrial culture or organized group of beings. And they were not ascended masters, and they were not ready for ascension. In fact, in every single way, they were the antithesis of that. And they hung around on the membrane of death intentionally instead of getting resolved. And they are like the cartoon character, still pedaling madly, not actually plummeting into non-being, and that they are siphoning energy from the living. They're in a non-living state, but not quite dead. And I can go into a lot of funny comedy about mostly dead. I wasn't dead, I wasn't alive, I was mostly dead, or something from The Princess Bride. But I don't want to dilute the profundity of the moment. Being mostly dead is not an empowered state and is not in any way equitable to what it is to be an ascended master and planetary ascension, which is what I point at when I point at this painting over here, which is called Birth of a New Dimension. Planetary ascension, and ascension as being the antithesis of death, and ascension as being a completely different pathway that our consciousness takes that has nothing at all to do with death, but does involve a continuation of our truest characteristics and a coming forward into states of expansiveness and freedom from what we were in as embodied material creatures. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what all of these true teachings from esoteric societies are about, like the book of Coming Forth into Day, which is the Egyptian book of the dead, quote unquote. It's the Egyptian book of coming forth into day, that the idea is your physical body would die, you would go across the bardo, which is the duat, which is representative of the night sky at night, an astral realm of wandering and grayness. Like, I'm kind of like, I'm squinting. It's not light, it's not dark. I don't know where the F I am. I don't know what's going on. Consciousness and souls going across that transit point, which is what the membrane of death is. And then through their attainment, through their spiritual mastery, getting to the other side and actually transcending the realm of limbo, purgatory, confusion, astral, which is different than a realm of being lost entirely. So it would be considered like a purgatory, but not a final realm of eternal punishment. Again, I'm saying these words, I hope you can sense the irony. Like, I am not a proponent of the world of eternal punishment at all. Why not? How can you tell that about me? Because of everything that I teach you about entropy, this place of entropy being a place where consciousness residues are resolved, and that as being the very positive, revolutionary level of innovation, entropy existed as a ideal before I created Flying Rainbow Lasagna, but there was not a direct path to get there. So entropy would have been the end result of the heat death of the cosmos. Like, all of the heat and all of the light and all of the consciousness has gone, and everything has gone into a black hole, and now you're just stuck in Nowheresville, very, very cold, going nowhere. That would be like in 13 billion years. Go to entropy, great, in 13 billion years, just hanging around waiting for it to happen. But that's 13 billion years of suffering that could be shortened or avoided by going to entropy immediately, which again goes to the original story of good consciousnesses that are like, I'm flawed, I'm here at the 0th dimension, I should go to entropy immediately. They should go to entropy immediately, and they should be reminded that they should go to entropy immediately. So the originals started the pyramid scheme. Get to the membrane of death, set up shop there. And this is the way that pyramid schemes work. The only guys that really profit from it are the guys that started. Whatever, executives 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are the guys that started the pyramid scheme. They're making out with all the money. Everybody else just pretty much works for them and does kickbacks for them. That is pretty much how the astral realm or the membrane of death or that whatever hell realm is set up. Because then you've got those guys that have never been embodied. Those guys influenced the guys, for example, on Mars, and the guys in the Crab Nebula, who are like, we're just gonna hover here forever, and we're never going to go into a state of peace or resolution. So they get a lot of their technology and pragmatisms of how to get this stuff done, which are terrible ideas, very, very bad math homework ideas that come from these guys that have never been embodied. And then what's the final part of the pyramid scheme, everyone? You're going to have to get some new recruits. And the pyramid scheme requires a constant influx of new recruits. And the proportion is always like this. 5 guys at the top are benefiting, and then you have hundreds, thousands, millions. These are the guys that are down here at the bottom of the pyramid, at the foundation level, and the constant influx of new recruits, that those are the guys that are always having to come in to sustain the out of balance economy. Those guys coming in, those are the newly dead. So there is so much that is created in terms of idea structure, pollution, and technology to create death in terms of harvesting consciousness to go to the membrane of death. So if you want to have any takeaways from all of this, it is stay alive, stay alive, stay alive, which is why I have criticisms of any philosophy or thought structure or religion that encourages you to die, because again, it is antithetical to the true brochure of what you are supposed to be doing in being here, the true resolution of freedom and what your planet is supposed to be doing, and the true states of what the direction of your soul. So you're not supposed to die, and death is not the doorway to freedom. Although I know that many people go into a state of acceptance, radical acceptance, and a lack of friction, and they are not fighting against it. And I respect everybody's path, but I am really here in order to give you great information that will help to guide you on your journey of consciousness, so that you will not do bad math homework erroneously from your ignorance, or do bad math homework choosing to do it because you think that it's going to bring you in the direction that you think you want to go, which is what I think some philosophies and religions do. As I say this with a very painful expression on my face that is built in love and compassion. love and compassion for the people that feel so trapped in this level of life experience that they think that death is freedom and death is the exit, when death is not freedom and it's not the exit. It is a crossing point that a lot of people get stuck in. So now I want to talk about a conscious death versus an unconscious death, because that relates to my notes from 10 years ago. But I also want to talk about what is fear. As I hold up this diagram here, and I talk to you about this membrane, which is a boundary between worlds, fear is supposed to be something that is like a creature that exists just on the inside of that membrane. So this is the area of life where I'm wiggling my pen right here. And as you get closer and closer and closer to the membrane of death, you know how trucks have that little noise, that proximity sensor that goes beep, like you're getting close to something, beep, there's an object, beep, 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 you're getting closer. That is what fear is supposed to be. The original design in a pristine system of God, who is so amazing, of making this system. Why would God create these fears? And the answer is fears are supposed to patrol the membrane of death. They're supposed to be in that area that is, again, the no person's land, no man's land. Before you get there, they're supposed to be the proximity sensor that says, beep, don't come here. Beep, beep, don't come here. Beep, 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 get out of here, kid. You ain't supposed to be here. And not something that should be in your direct path at all if your path is going towards ascension. So if you are going in perfect divine alignment on all the timelines where you're supposed to be, playing the most beautiful, perfect music of love, you should have zero fear. You should have no fears in front of you. It's not just that you should be like this. Hey, I ain't afraid of nothing because I can see everything and I can drive the car of my life in the right direction. I have total knowledge and total freedom and total guidance. It's not only that, which it is, because of course, like you would never be afraid of running out of food if you're like, but I know where all the grocery stores are. And I know how to get there. And I know that they've all got pistachios and avocados and whatever are your favorite foods. I know exactly where all the nourishment is located, and I just go there and get it. That is truthful. In that way, in that pragmatic sense, you avoid fear because you have total knowing of where everything is that you require and how to get there and how to get it. But also, you have a lack of fear when there literally are not fear monsters that are in front of you. Now, in this world that is a non-pristine system, there are fear monsters that have been repurposed or reprogrammed from patrolling the membrane of death to being directly in front of you when you are on the ascension pathway. That is not fair. That is not right. Imagine like some horrific monster with like big, giant, sharp teeth or whatever it is, whatever's the embodiment of your fear. And it's supposed to be like way over to the side. And if you go in the wrong direction, the monster's like, hi, I'm that monster. Get out of here, kid. You're not supposed to be here. But what if you're on the right path? What if you're doing all the right stuff and the monster is still right in front of you? And you have to actually go directly into the monster or, face it directly in order to be able to ascend and get back to God and remember your divinity, which is what a lot of the unfairness is that we are facing right now. These fears are not supposed to be in our pathway. We are receiving erroneous fear signals when we are in alignment with our true path of longevity. And then that makes it very difficult to learn. Again, I would be doing you a great disservice if I presented this world as if it is a pristine school system and everybody is learning perfectly, when there's such huge flaws like that. And you could be like, well, I just got to avoid my fears, except your fears might be directly smack dab in front of you when you're supposed to be going on your path. And those fears are trying to dissuade you from staying on your ascension path. And essentially the fears are trying to push you away from ascension and towards the periphery. And I think that, so there's a bunch of things. There's teachings about the enviability of death. Like, I envy the dead. I envy those great ones who have come before us and who have died, or the state of death is going to be so tempting, comfortable, and good. That brings you off your path and towards death. But also, when you are on the right path, heading towards eternal life, and something stands in front of you as a great fear that is not supposed to be there. And then you have to recognize it as a phantasm, as a fabrication, as a non-real illusion. Miss Cheeky, the great teacher, has arrived. Cheeky, show everybody your beautiful face. Wait. I know we're taking a little dog break here. I'm sorry, I know I get very silly because you guys all need to see. Cheeky's right here. There, see Cheeky's face. Awesome, fantastic, good. Cheeky just got up, probably because there was a siren or something outside, and decided to come in here and get some reassurances. She's like, sirens make me afraid. Don't worry. Okay, thank you. I'm hugging her just for a few moments here. Let me get to some of these questions, and then let me continue with my notes. Hold on. So way back here, Melissa says, how to handle memories of loved ones who have passed. Imagine them alive in another timeline, or eventually stop remembering them, or when you do remember, to do it in a positive way. Beautiful question, because of course I have loved ones, humans who have passed on, and I also have loved ones, animals, like my cat who passed on, and she was definitely a family member to me. So, you know, and initially when she died, it was like a very sudden, violent death by the attack of another animal. So it wasn't like, oh, I had a long time to prepare. Like, she was like here one minute, gone the next. And I really was, went into like a very, like a denial state. When I really wanted, I was like, wanting to think of her as still alive, not wanting to let go. And that, so there's a couple of different teachings that I, you know, go into when I think about these things. One is the sense that, you know, when my cat died, her consciousness remains alive on a parallel timeline where I actually died. What happens in death is everybody actually begins to be focusing away from the membrane here and towards the journey home, which is that central core timeline. But as each organism is doing its upright focusing towards eternal life, we are focusing away from others. So as my cat was focusing towards eternal life as an ascended cat master, and I was focusing on eternal life as me, Aurora, our timelines focused away from each other, and we no longer overlapped or coincided. We no longer were at the level of having our realities being the same reality. So on one timeline, my cat died, but I stayed alive. On a different timeline, my cat stayed alive, but from her perspective, I am the one who died. That I went out for cat food one day, got smashed up on the highway, and never returned. And, you know, my friends adopted her, and she probably moved to Arizona or something like that. Okay. But she would remember me and be like, oh, I remember Aurora, my old human, but she's not here anymore. So that's like one of the most neutral ways to think about all of this, that really doesn't require the sustenance of anybody in an afterlife. This is so big. Thank you for opening the door on this. Let's talk afterlife. Guys, let's talk afterlife, because afterlife is really considered to be the zone of organized religion. That really, one of the reasons why people turn to organized religion is to answer giant existential questions of what happens after you die. Not only how did I get here, what am I doing here, but what happens after you die? And the real answer as to, like, if you die, what happens after you die is the continuation of your consciousness, whatever momentum and thought form presences and habits you had in life continue in death. And this also relates to our present level of society, where we have those who are, let's say, in a military and are violent and warlike in life, continue their warlike behaviors in death. Intelligence agents, those whom practice power abuse, that's what intelligence agencies do. They say, I am above you, I condescend to you, I'm going to keep you peasants in the dark. I'm going to control or manipulate your consciousness. This is what propagandists do. Government agencies, propaganda, including media. They say, I get to know more, I get to do more, I get to be more. You are the lowly peasants. When they die, they don't all of a sudden become like shiny, nice, good people. They're like, oh, great. Now I'm going to keep on doing whatever's the momentum of whatever they were continues onward in that after existence. That is literally what the astral realm is. So this astral realm membrane or boundary between levels of existence is also sometimes experienced or explored in astral reveries, known as out-of-body experiences, or lucid dreams, or near-death experiences, or hallucinatory drugs experiences that might or happen from a molecule like DMT or LSD or something like that. But those are all like, if this is the membrane of death, those go into just like this little zone over here. Not even the highest levels of that realm of pure thought forms, but just into that murky level. I call it a bad neighborhood. I actually have always told people, like, don't go to bad neighborhoods. Don't get in your Merkaba. Don't get in your consciousness vehicle and drive to a bad neighborhood. Like, you're just going to find poop there. Literally, you're just going to find the worst consciousness residues of things that should not be in existence anymore, if ever. So let's say we've got someone who's a power abuser in life, and they're like, I'm a power abuser and I like being more powerful than others. I'm a bully on the playground. And then they die. Live by the sword, die by the sword. Somebody shoots them in the head and they die. And they're like, I'm not going to a peaceful state. I'm not learning what I did wrong in my life. I'm not getting the correction, the soul correction. I'm going to stay in this type of semi-existence, not going into a resolution, and hang out with all of these other ghostly, unresolved things that have a whole organization at this point. So these things that hang out on the membrane of death aren't just lone operators, like one person that decides to go build a hut in the wilderness. They're actually like, oh, look, like there's a whole village here. There's a whole empire here. I can be someone in this empire. And it's very similar to a pretty good TV show that was called The Magicians, where there is an esoteric society that is a society of magical librarians. They have access to people's books, which is pretty much like your Akashic records. And they have access to many different spell books and incantation books. And when you die, the physical death as a librarian, your contract doesn't end. You end up working for the library, but just in the afterlife. This is very directly analogous to what happens in this world here, where people make agreements upon entering into militaries, like physical armies of nation states, and esoteric societies, and oaths that are made in intelligence agencies too. And then those agreements and contracts are still in continuation even after or upon the physicality death of what those guys experience. Their consciousness and the momentum of what they were doing continues onward. This is like, you don't want any of this to actually happen. It's actually like some of the worst torture and torment you could experience, because it means you never get a chance to learn. The whole idea is you should hit the membrane of death. You should splat like a bug splats on the windshield. You should be like, oh, S-H-I-T, I did something wrong. I should do it better. You should go back to the beginning and try again, as opposed to hitting the membrane of death, realizing that you're dead, and then being like, now I'm going to hang out here, hovering in a state of quantum indeterminacy for however many thousands of years, and exploit the journey of other consciousnesses who are newly dead, and or influence the living. which is also totally antithetical, that these boundaries are supposed to be hard boundaries where, I'll call them the peanut gallery. Like, you don't want to have the peanut gallery, which are these, dead, disembodied people yelling at you while you're here in life trying to do stuff. Like, imagine you're like trying to play golf or paint a painting, and you have these discarnate, unrestful souls yelling at you like blah, 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 blah. Like, it's incredibly distracting. And of course, you're trying to make the perfect putt and your ball goes in the wrong direction. For me, like, I'm trying to paint these tiny little lines. My hand goes in the wrong direction because I've got a bunch of angry, disgusting ghosts shouting at me. Why in the world are they able to shout at me? They shouldn't. They should, first of all, be receiving their life review. They should, second of all, not be empowered to use energy in any way. And they should, third of all, whatever their experience is, not be porous to this realm. So just like in your tummy, you can have a digestive issue that's called leaky gut, when your mucous membranes are not solid, and then little pieces of cheese or whatever gets into your bloodstream and your body starts going into autoimmune overdrive because it's like, this stuff is not supposed to be here. This stuff is not supposed to be here. We have leaky gut of the membranes, of the interstices, of death. You got it? This stuff is not supposed to be here. So not only would I say that this disease is analogous to arterial blockages, where you have undigested emotional residues that are on the membrane of death that need to be resolved in order for the health of the entirety of time, for the blood flow of time to flow where it's supposed to go. But then you also have autoimmune problems where there is leakages of energy and consciousness and energy out of place. I call energy out of place is EOP, E-O-O-P, energy out of place. We've got EOP. And that is stuff that's not supposed to, it is in a place and doing stuff that it is not supposed to be in that place. It's definitely not supposed to be doing stuff. Because again, if something was just stuck on the membrane of death or just frozen there, oh, it's having its oh shit moment, but it's not actually harming you. And the real issue is all of these membranes reside within you. These membranes are not just some abstraction up there, out there, or around the neighborhood. This is your chakra that exists as a whirling, swirling force field of time inside of you, and that these destabilizers live on these chakras that are inside of you. Another way of thinking about this is that there are these consciousness impulses that bounce down the DNA time tunnels without life review. And that is actually one of the worst imprisonments for them, even as it greatly inconveniences you and I. Imprisonment for them? What? How? Because they never learn. They never learn what they're supposed to learn. So you're supposed to have your life review. Like, even if you were a horrible mafioso, you shot a bunch of people and tortured them and flayed them alive, like the worst of the worst. And if you did that and you die, somebody shoots you in the back of the head, you're supposed to be like, oh, I'm dead. Then you're supposed to learn like, wow, I did bad things and I hurt that person and that person, that person, that person, that person. Then either do it differently within this incarnation, or of course, do it differently as you are experiencing parallel incarnations. But what you can't do is just be like, oh yeah, I killed 25 million people and then I died, and now I'm not going to feel or learn anything about all of that. On to the next, which is what some of these consciousness residues have been doing for millennia. That some of them have a huge emotional backlog of lessons that they have not learned because they have avoided being under the microscope and any amount of self-reflection or assessment of their actual activities, that they always sneak out the side door before they actually turn in and have to look at their math homework, and they will not take responsibility for any of the stuff that they've done. And they also tend to do these things where they either have a group identification, but with group negation of responsibility. And what does that mean? That means if you say like, okay, I'm part of an intelligence, I am not part of an intelligence agency, but I'm speaking as if I am in character. I'm part of an intelligence agency, and then I do these things and I kill these people. It ain't my fault. I was following orders. I blame the intelligence agency. So I'm never going to take personal responsibility because someone else made me do it. But the agency itself or the larger organization will similarly never take collective responsibility. So this is done in many different ways. It can say, I shot those people, but it's not my fault. The army made me. Blame the army. But the army is going to be like, don't blame us. We're the army. We don't take any collective responsibility. Or the magical society. I cursed all of those people, but don't blame me. I was part of this whole organization of everybody's cursing everybody, and it's normal. And I blame the organization of cursed ones. Again, the organization never takes responsibility for what it's done, or the intelligence agency itself. And at the same time, this is being done with artificial intelligence, as there are space races that give up or abdicate is the word. They abdicate from their own personal responsibility because they say, hey, nano wetware, come live inside of me. Hey, nano wetware, you tell me what to do and you drive my car and you make me go here and you make me go here and you make me do this and experience this. And then all these people get killed and all this bad stuff happens, but don't blame me. It wasn't my fault. It was the artificial intelligence, nanotechnology that was acting through me. It wasn't me at all. This is my stupid face. And that way, and there's no learning. And of course, the artificial intelligence does not take any responsibility for what it has done either. There is never that sense of the overarching organization taking responsibility. It ends up being a a faceless conglomerate or amalgamation of larger errors that does not take personal responsibility. And then I also say this too, I have a lot of these things that might sound lighthearted, but it's also talking about dark stuff. I call it the hot tub from hell, that this is what a lot of these organizations are about. So on the one hand, it might be a person that is in the military or a government agency or religious or esoteric agency, intelligence agency. They are at times directing their own behavior, and they are at times having something else live through them. And the thing that lives through them as their hand puppets is not always the same thing. Like something comes in, lives through them, and then hops back into the hot tub from hell. You got it? So because in a hot tub, you're in the soup of everybody's microbes. Everybody's toenail fungus is your fungus. Everybody's gross, disgusting, whatever, fermented scrotal smegma becomes yours. It's the gross stuff that everything is becomes all of your gross stuff. But on the other hand, it becomes everybody's gross stuff. So these are soul gross fermented fungal infections that have not been resolved, that these souls or individuated consciousnesses are exploiting DNA, hopping into and out of bodies, but not going through the life process review of death, influencing the living, influencing life, but never taking responsibility for it. Then instead of recognizing the suffering that they've caused, just jumping out, returning to the hot tub from hell, because they can be like, well, like, let's say some murderer, Madman X. This entity over here was in Madman X and they killed victim number 1. Then he jumped back into the hot tub from hell. Then a different entity got out of the hot tub from hell and jumped into Madman X and killed victim number 2 and then jumped back into the hot tub from hell. It was different entities that were jumping into that same container that opened itself up. Like this is, I know that I'm like, my words are becoming fragmented as I'm talking about this, but because as I begin to explain and describe and contextualize the exploitations of consciousness, the exploitation of the consciousness refinery and refinement system, the specifics of the way in which this is an aberrance and unfair things are happening that have happened for a long amount of time. In the context of all of that, I can't simply say to you, oh, we'll just become non-edible to them. Because guess what? Our whole entire planet can become and was at one point non-edible. And this is them hey, nice non-edible planet you got there. Would be a real problem, would be a real shame if someone turned on a zap ray and siphoned all of that energy off in terms of making it a lower vibration frequency food for poop. And that's exactly what happened to us, because we all had perfect Merkabahs in ancient Atlantis. We all had perfect spiritual practices. We all had a perfect divinely connected genetic code, and none of this should ever have been able to happen to us. It was an unhackable system, but somehow we find ourselves in these levels of supreme discomfort and unfairness. So what I wrote and shared 10 years ago was in many ways a perfect expression of innocent truth in a pristine system, but can be disempowering and weaponized against you in its partial truth of how it relates to your experience of the moment, where you have to recognize that even with your total uprightness, perfect posture, and perfect spiritual attainment, that they can zap and influence you to then be somehow vulnerable to either their inhabitation or consumption of your energy, either inhabitation of your body or consumption of your energy. And all of that is totally unfair, because ascension is supposed to be a meritocracy and a sieve, or a keeping out boundaries that keep out that which is inappropriate, unloving, and should not be at these higher levels, and only allowing through entities, organisms, or personality characteristics that should be at these higher levels. So that, I want to wrap up effectively this question from Melissa. How do we think positively about the dead? Because this speaks to afterlife, because this speaks to maintaining the existence like an echo, like a gong. You strike the gong and it keeps on going wah, wah, wah for a long time, even after the stimulation of the actual instrument. That what we would wish for is to maintain the longevity and coherence of the true thought forms and personality characteristics that were in existence, the true personality characteristics of your grandma or your cat or any other organism that was truly alive, but that anything that was not the true longevity characteristic should go to peace, should go to that state of entropy, or if it were a gong, it's like when you put your hand on it and it stops reverberating. That is what would be the most positive thing to do. And I think that our heart naturally does do that after the grieving process, and it can take years. Usually the anger, guilt, recriminations, and blamefulness of relationships go by the wayside, and what remains is just anything that was truly loving. So there might have been an abusive or negative relationship, but what ends up happening is you process through, the person has died, you process through all of that stuff that was, negative anger and hatred. And again, the recriminations and blame and shame and all of that. And at a certain point, you do get to the level of love and acceptance, which is not denial of those negative personality characteristics, but is a recognition that's not who that person even actually really was. And the only parts that really stick with you are the true loving aspects of that person. And if there was nothing true and loving, then none of that would stick with you. And in terms of ascension, what would this look like as the experience of ascension? Because I talk about this a lot. Ascension and how experts do star travel is when you go through the sun as a portal of consciousness, and you do not bring any of your emotional and consciousness baggage with you. You can't. It can't fit through that doorway. It does not fit in your carry-on luggage. Like if you try to put the suitcase that's too big in the overhead of the airplane, they say, sorry, you can't do that. We're going to kick you off the airplane. You can't fit that luggage up here. That is what the true experience of ascension is. You literally cannot bring something that is in the shape of hatred with you on your journey as you go. So all of that stuff, all of that baggage has to be resolved. It is temporal. It is not the eternal aspect of yourself, but you must recognize when you have been injured, like that's a big part of it. Like healing is real. There has to be acceptance and recognition of the injuries that you have received so that you can go onward, because you can't just be in denial, which would be like, la, 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 everything is great, I'm ascending now. And this actually goes back to something deep that I recorded over 2 years ago as part of my Patreon videos, where I said, can you ascend with baggage? And the answer is yes, because I think that I had falsely portrayed it up until this point as you can only ascend if you're this perfect person with all of your emotional injuries completely resolved, and then you're able to just like gently float upwards and everything is great. And I really feel that we're in this personal and planetary ascension process where it is the antithesis of denial, because you can't bring these undigested, unresolved issues with you, either from your own life or as a result of planetary invasion. That there's a lot of things that have happened to us as individuals and as a culture and as the definition of what it is to be human that have been completely unfair and completely wrong, and that they've caused a lot of suffering to us. So letting go of grandma's criticisms or biting comments to you about whatever, you're too fat, you're too skinny, brush your hair, or whatever things grandma might have said to you, that was not her real personality, but that this was this harshness. That's very minor stuff in comparison to the injuries that have happened to our whole planet, the invention of death, the sense that our entire genetic code has been changed and diminished, our entire connection to God and to the divine consciousness that should be with us at all times has been very much diminished. The idea of our ecosystem changing and eating plants and animals, all of this has changed. All of this is an insult. Like the teachings of, karma that come from Asia and the Himalayas, in many ways, they are blaming the victim because you are eating plants and animals. And it's like, well, you're getting karma. You ate those plants and animals. Take responsibility for it. Yes, you ate the plants and animals within the larger overarching context of a world that's been invaded, where they took away your capacity to eat nothing but pure light. And then even right now during planetary ascension, have been peeing and pooping all over your attempts to get back to being a light eater. All of that is very, very unfair, blame the victim type of stuff. So I hope, let's, this is not the end of this teaching, but let's definitely keep talking about this, because I want you to be absolutely empowered in recognizing what we are doing as we are in this process of planetary ascension. Lucy says, do we give them space for a few months to transition? Yeah. So a lot of things happen when a well-meaning positive organism dies through its accident or misadventure or disease. There are things to learn, and everybody needs to take time to learn. And if you are dead or newly dead, remember my words here, like you actually, love is the universal solvent. And what happens on the most positive sense is a sense of self-reflection, recognition, retrospective on your journey, and then the release so that you may move forward. These are the best of any of these types of movies or TV shows where the characters or occupants recognize that they are dead and that they're in a dream. Okay, like Donnie Darko or something like that. The main character, oh, spoiler alert, at a certain point begins to recognize that he is dead and in an afterlife, and begins to bring it towards levels of personal self-empowerment. Because something, it's true, if you're dead, it doesn't really matter whether you go to school or finish your term paper or, whatever, stand up to your guidance counselor or any of those things. You can do any and all of those things, but truly, when you are dead, the greatest level of self-realization and attainment is to cease to identify with your individuation self as an entity and to go into unity consciousness. But unity consciousness is not the hot tub from hell. You get it? Everything that I talk about when I talk about galactic level civilization, and I use that word very intentionally, the truly civilized, cultivated, highly aware consciousness levels that are at the level of the galaxy take not only personal responsibility, but group responsibility. So I am Aurora. I am a portion or a part of a consciousness collective. I take responsibility for my music and my choices, like my choice to do Flying Rainbow Lasagna and come here into this body. but also take responsibility for what the entirety of my collective is doing. If my whole entire collective played bad music, I'd be like, guys, that music sounds terrible and reflects badly upon me. I'm a part of you and you're playing that music. I can't let this happen. That is what good consciousness does. If you were a part of any type of organization or agency or military or whatever it is, and you're like, this organization or agency is committing horrific crimes on a grand scale, and I'm a part of it, I need to stop it. I need to stop this from happening. I'm a part of this thing, as opposed to the hot tub from hell approach and denialism says, I'm a good person. I'm a part of an evil agency. I blame everybody else. It's their responsibilities. It's not my responsibility at all. When really the truth is, like, it is your responsibility, and you are divinely placed or ordained or mandated in your life experience. If you're in that situation, you're supposed to clean it up. You get it? Like, if you are like, wow, I find myself part of this corrupt mafia organization or corrupt corporation or organization, agency, whatever it is, if you're there and you're a part of it, and you don't want to have all of that hot tub from hell blowback and be marinating in the evil toenail fungus of every other organism that you're connected to, you have to disavow and then try to clean up. You have to be like, either I'm not in this agency, like formally cutting ties, or I once was a part of this agency and my only interest, now that I learned that it's totally evil, is in cleaning up corruption and making it no longer evil. That is the responsible response of a galactic citizen. But many of these creatures, organisms, the occupiers of the membrane of death say this, wow, poor me, I ended up on the membrane of death. It's filled with a giant pit of corruption. And as I said, fermented toenail smegma and gross stuff. It's not my fault. I ended up here, through no fault of my own. And it's everybody else's fault but me. And somebody else saved me. And that, like the damsel type. I'm a damsel in distress. Somebody else save me. Somebody else fix it. And none of that is acceptable at all. And that literally it is what keeps consciousnesses stuck in those levels of suffering is their continued identification with certain negative personality characteristics and continued lack of responsibility in terms of consciousness getting into that position. So consciousness is like a neutral miracle of supernatural awareness. Consciousness sometimes goes down the wrong road. Like you can imagine whenever electrons that flow down a wire that doesn't connect to someplace, and then they're like, oh, shit, I'm not supposed to actually be here. What you can be like this, I blame everybody else but me. Somehow I ended up here. Somebody saved me. It's not my fault. And then consciousness can instead say, somehow I ended up here. I somehow contributed to this. I have a purpose in being here. How can I fix and heal the system from this perspective of me being here, which would then be a consciousness that chooses to go into entropy and heal and rectify the entire situation by that choice. All of these consciousnesses that are stuck on the membrane of death actually have the capacity in free will to say, I recognize that I made horrible life choices of consciousness that brought me here into this spot, but I'm not stuck, that I could actually choose to go into a state of entropy, which would be a divesting, like when you divest yourself of different investments, instead of saying, I'm going to keep on getting energy dividends, because I haven't spoken enough about energy dividends. Not only do they not, so, okay, these guys get on the membrane of death on purpose. They are stuck there not by accident. And then they do all sorts of stuff to keep themselves hovering as opposed to falling off of the cliff. And those are dividends that they make an energy investment that can be harming you, the living. Like I talked about the consciousness and guy that from the hot tub from hell is going to hop into Madman X, stab a bunch of people, then hop back into the hot tub from hell. But that guy does get to have the dividends. I created trauma over here, and now I will get 10 units of negative and emotional energy as a result of that trauma. And those 10 units of negative emotional energy are going to sustain my consciousness on the membrane of death. This is, again, the economy of hell. And it's done very intentionally, not by accident at all. Like you guys, you know, if you have a stock market portfolio, it's done very intentionally. You don't just accidentally end up with like this many shares of Amazon and then this many shares of whatever, Apple computers. You buy them intentionally. They intentionally invest in trauma to distort the consciousness journeys of those who are alive, to destabilize your energy field, your emotions, and the activities of your DNA and of your life, to be able to siphon energy off in perpetuity to be able to sustain them. This goes a lot bigger than the sense of the simplistic prescription that I gave you, just starve them out. You got it. This is why I have to say all of this over the course of 1 hour and 46 minutes here today, because for me to come forward and say, eat your food mindfully, starve them out. Don't make food for pooties by going into anger, sadness, hatred, rage, and all those other things, totally simplistic. And I would even go further to say, like, there are some aspects of rage that can be divine righteousness and wrathfulness, where you represent as an avatar of justice, the justice that should happen in this world. Anger and white hot rage can be incredibly empowering states of energy that I don't want any of you to be like, la, 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 I'm a vanilla milkshake and I never feel any rage and everyone can walk all like vanilla milkshake doormat, which is what I think some people characterize ascended mastery as. I don't want any of you to ever aspire to be a vanilla milkshake doormat of huge disempowerment, because I want you to be actively rectifying, healing, and restructuring the cosmos that is clearly in need, in deep need and requirement of fixing, healing, and restructuring. And that this fixing, healing, restructuring is also not just about you somehow squeezing your way out of a giant corrupt garbage heap and making it to the levels of ascended mastery. That's not what we are here to do. Again, so that's like saying, okay, the world's a pile of poop, filth, and corruption, but I'm going to ascend. I'm going to get out of here, leaving behind a pile of poop, filth, and corruption. But you can all navigate and figure out that no, actually no, because that is as hot tub from hell as the evil ones. That was, we're like, well, you know something, I am here and I'm on my journey to achieve ascended mastery. And I'm also here to heal and rectify the entirety of this refinery of consciousness, so that it is fair, so that it reflects cosmic law, so that it is just, so that consciousnesses that are supposed to transcend the sieve, the catch basin, get through. If you are a beautiful, cultivated, loving presence, you should get through. You shouldn't be stuck like the macaroni at the bottom of the sink. You know what I mean? That's in the catch basin, the gross fermented stuff when you're doing your dishes, beans and macaroni and celery fibers that you don't want to go down the garbage disposal. You're like, I'm actually the good stuff that I'm supposed to transcend these sieves, or they're essentially a frequency door that you get through the frequency door by being the right shape. But what if you get through the frequency door because you're like, okay, I figured it out. I know it's a flawed system, but I managed to figure it out. But you're like, but all of those guys are stuck back in the frequency sieve like rotten spaghetti, and they're never going to make it through. If you didn't take personal responsibility and fix the entirety of the system, you would be as flawed as the hot tub from hell people, because what you would be doing is exploiting for your own personal gain and individual uplift this flawed system of ascension while it leaves others in the dust. If you are able to ascend perforce, you must help others to ascend, either to transcend the unfairness of the system or to make the system fair, because otherwise the whole entire thing becomes meaningless. Instead of ascension being a club or a group that is a meritocracy based upon your attainment, your personal merit, and everything that's supposed to happen. Instead, it just becomes the people that learned exploits and how to hack the system and how to navigate it effectively, the ones who were in the right place at the right time. And oops, you ended up being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Oops, you're stuck in the spaghetti strainer of reality. And then I'm up here doing the backstroke, but you're down there suffering and struggling. All of that totally wrong and not non-righteous. And so I hope that my criticisms come across from the right direction, because I'm literally one of the only people that is in a position to criticize, because I was at this level of attainment that is beyond the spaghetti strainer in higher dimensional reality, where my Aurora collective is. And I have flying rainbow lasagnaed or backbended in here into time, because I saw the profound unfairnesses of the system and its structural flaws, and have literally been here for 20 years to fix things up. It's not just about saving yourself and getting your own soul into a proper trajectory, although that is your primary responsibility to yourself. You are also responsible to all of the other souls, which are also aspect of self, which are also on their journey. And if you were disempowered, you would want someone to come along and to rectify the audition process. Like, these auditions aren't even fair. Who's overseeing the audition process? You would want that to be overseen. So wait, more questions. Pedro says, hi, does sending to entropy work only for Putis or also for other beings that want to harm us? Sending to entropy works for any personality characteristic or aspect of being that is energy out of place, or something that is in existence that is not supposed to be in existence. So sending to entropy works for a person, a characteristic of a person or a personality trait, a group like a species, an organization, a thought structure, an item like it could be an atom or a molecule or something like that. It can be anything, person, or concept that is not something that is supposed to be in existence. And there's different levels, like I said. Oh, so this, of the things that exist on the membrane of death, we've got just well-meaning consciousness residues. Grandma or grandpa died and they're just hanging out on the membrane of death. And they might not even know what's going on. And you can just say to them, you're dead. And they're like, oh, I'm dead. Time for me to go into entropy. Like my mistake. Time for me to go into a peaceful state. So this speaks actually to Melissa's question. You know, when I think in the most positive sense of the people that I've known that have passed on, instead of imagining them in some afterlife fantasy land, I really imagine them in a sense of peacefulness. I think that that is the most appropriate, righteous, and loving and giving thing I can do for them. I think that is actually self-serving when I imagine them in an afterlife playground, still being alive, still maintaining their 2 arms and 2 legs and face and their identity of who they were, because I miss them. Like, oh, I remember my friends, we used to go out and sing karaoke. They're singing karaoke in heaven. I think that is my smaller, more self-serving desire, that I like to imagine that they're still in their form that I knew them as, doing the things that I remember them doing, but that the most righteous in a cosmic sense thing I can do for those who have died or passed on is to imagine them being in a state of peacefulness. This is big. How do we define sense of self? Because in the notes from 10 years ago, I also talk about this. Our bodies versus the bacteria that are in our bodies, that's known as your microbiome, microbes that are your allies in digesting your food, but that you do not identify with as self. Here's a little thought experiment. When I say to you, please raise your right hand. Raise my right hand. Are all of the lactobacillus in your intestines also raising their right hand? And the answer is no. They're in your intestines eating and digesting lactose, because that's what they do. They are lactobacillus. And they have a different DNA structure than you. So they don't respond to your willpower. They don't have the resonance of your genetic antenna. They are not part of your soul journey. They are traveling in parallel to you. They're in your guts. You carry them around. They do stuff that benefits you, but they are not synonymous with or interchangeable with you. And then this has to do with when somebody dies, what is my definition of them? They are not defined by the lactobacillus in their stomach. They are not defined by their negative personality characteristics that they might have inherited from their family. Like, let's say if I knew someone, I'm making this up, but if I knew someone who was a cheapskate in life, and we always went out to lunch, but I always paid for everything and they never paid, they were cheap in that way. And I could be like, that's their negative personality characteristic, and they're this and they're that. But I can also recognize that is an outgrowth of their family, their culture, the things that they were taught in terms of value system, and is not the true definition of who they are as a person. So that aspect of their personality, I would wish to go into a state of non-being. It's not an eternal personality characteristic, and it's not the definition of who they are. But I might remember, even though they didn't pay for lunch, there might have been some things that they said to me over lunch that were very loving or positive, or in some other way, a valuable thing that should resonate across time, something that is a memory that I should carry with me for forever. You get it? Like, at a certain point when you go through the sun, you're not bringing your baggage in the overhead carrying compartment. You don't have baggage like that. You only bring with you the kindnesses and the love, the things that you talked about over lunch when this person might have really listened to you and seen you on your journey. You don't bring with you this sense of, I was disappointed in my friend because I had to pay for lunch again. And then this, it's another $10 out of my pocket, which is true and which is valid and which is part of the boundary system of being in economy and being in physicality. But on a soul level, that was not the defining characteristic of the person that you were talking with. There was genuine love in the conversation that you were talking with. So again, everything that I'm talking about here in my lecture today is greater levels of finesse as you are cognitively perceiving reality more accurately than the simplistic and reductionist generalized teaching that is in the recorded lesson from 10 years ago. Because I really want you to imprint upon and take to heart the value system of what I'm sharing with you now, and never to only be empowered, never to be disempowered from the things that I shared with you of the way that things should work in an ideal world. In an ideal world, you should practice love, self-compassion, and self-cultivation to the point that you are not food for pooties, to the point where you are not food in a chicken coop. Remember the humaneros of Don Juan, Active Side of Infinity from Carlos Castaneda? Yeah, food, being food for the flyers, or food for archons or negative entities, or whatever we would like to call them, and being on a human farm. All of that is an apt description of life pre-ascension, and now we are going into these levels of ascension. That is the transcendence of that level of being. But I'm telling you that the transcendence of that level of imprisonment is more than just like, just stop being food, which would mean like, it's like, don't get angry. If someone punches you in the face, just don't get angry. I actually don't think that. I actually think that you should get righteously angry, and that you should do something very, very effective, as opposed to be like, la, 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 not going to get angry, being a vanilla milkshake doormat. And part of my mild criticism of the teachings of the Christian church is taking the exemplary life of the teacher who is amazing and great that we know as Jesus Christ, and teachings about pacifism and nonviolence, and turning it into a weaponization and an inversion to make you think that you should be endlessly punched in the face and then offer endless forgiveness. La, 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 vanilla milkshake doormat. No, that is not how you get to real heaven. You do not get to real heaven by being an endless victim or experiencer of abuse. And because the Christian doctrine is, yep, let him punch you in the face and turn the other cheek and forgive him. And that's endless, like punch, cheek, forgive, punch, cheek, forgive, punch, cheek, forgive, punch, forgive, punch, forgive, punch, forgive, punch, forgive. But that does not include it, that is an insanity loop, because it does not include any aspect of repentance, which is what true Christianity should teach, that if others are to be trying to harm you, or negative demons are trying to harm you, that you can offer them forgiveness, but forgiveness must come after repentance. And repentance includes, I'm sorry that I punched you in the face, and I ain't going to do it again. You got it? That it ends the time loop of negative victimhood. And I think you're getting this. Running over the cliff, endless time loops of negative perpetual victimhood, that if they can prevent humans from acting, or those who are ascending, from acting effectively against the violences, both on an emotional and soul, or also on a physical level, then we would break the karmic loops. That essentially these unfairnesses keep on repeating in repeated cycles and never being resolved, because of some of these negative teachings about allowing the scales to remain unbalanced and not fighting back effectively. So fighting back is not the right word. That's why I stumbled over it. Respond. You must respond effectively as a responsible individual. Hold on one sec. I need to get a little bit more water on this marathon. Hold on one second. Melissa goes and says, EITOOP, energy, is totally out of place, spells Pooty backwards, LOL. I love it. So we've got EOOP, which is energy out of place, but there's energy totally out of place, and that is Pooty backwards. I love it, and you definitely deserve a hat tip for that. Wonderful, a good, beautiful, beautiful lightheartedness. Pedro has a question, says, if DNA moves us through time, what about things that don't have DNA? Booyah, I love you, you're great. Okay, so I say this all the time, DNA is a bridge of light. It is a biological, molecular thing that is in our container, that in its gyrations and motions and oscillations propels us from moment to moment. But it is not the only thing that propels consciousness from moment to moment. So yes, it is possible to be a part of time and to be in existence as consciousness, experiencing the flow of time without being an owner operator of DNA. There's molecular, mineral consciousness. There's no DNA in this actual crystal, but there can be consciousness here. Planet. Although the planet contains DNA bearing species such as you and me and redwood trees, the planet herself, which is being propelled through time, does not have DNA herself. That's big. And the sun and the stars. The sun and the stars emit time, are propelled through time themselves, and are experiencers and emanators of time. They do not have DNA. So DNA is an aspect of self. It's an aspect of the time field, but it is not the only thing that is a container for or a propeller for consciousness. That's such a good question and such a good opportunity for me to really clarify on that. Because I exist as Aurora, a higher dimensional consciousness waveform that actually does not have DNA. And then I came into this body to get some DNA. Like there was a very, very real intention and purpose for me getting a container like this, that I can do stuff and am at levels of empowerment when it comes to the DNA code in this container body, that I would not have had those levels of experience and empowerment if I was not in this container body. And some of that has to do with the sending to entropy of things that are in my body, because I have a container body, I have chakras, and I have these pooties, as you do, trying to influence me or influence me on my soul's journey. Totally appropriate for me, like, oh, you're trying to influence me on my soul's journey. Well, I'm going to do this, this, and this, because a lot of cosmic law and cause and effect has to do with, does something relate to you personally? So if it's like, yeah, they're going to paint that house purple over there, it's like, okay, they're going to paint it purple. It's not my house. I don't live there. It's going to affect those people over there. But if I live in that house and they're going to paint it purple, it affects me and I get to do something about it. So a big part of my choice and spontaneous decision and spontaneous creation of the FRL portal to come into physical being of a body that has DNA had everything to do with moving into the purple house, because I'm like, they're about to paint that place purple. It's going to look terrible. I cannot let this happen. So there are all sorts of allies and levels of consciousness that we have in the world that are of beings of pure light. So DNA is a molecular bridge of light, light being information, ideas, superstructure, you could call it that, overarching intelligence, network of information that is being exchanged from various different nodes or perspectives. DNA, when I say bridge of light, means that it is a modality that takes something as an abstract potential of information and brings it forward into the embodied experience of having a physical form and having physical interactions. There are many aspects of light, intelligence, information, consciousness, awareness, and cognition that are in existence that are outside of DNA, and they are still totally valid, and they are still, I wanted to say experiencing time, but that's not the right way of saying it. I want to say influencing time, interactive with time. They are still interactive with time. They're still a part of time. As I say, the language is inadequate to talk about this, but my Aurora collective, from my original perspective and where I vibrate all the time, is a time outside of time. I am technically outside of time-space dimensionality, although I am still interactive with it and perceiving of it. Words are not adequate to be able to talk about the truth of what is experienced. But I will say this, being propelled through time has to do with being submerged in time as a first-person experiencer, and is different than the experience and perspective of being outside of or up above or perceiving the holistic entirety, the nature of the whole of what event structures in time and in DNA are. And when you are perceiving the whole, you're still a part of it and you still care about it. And it still very much has a personal meaningfulness to you, but it is not the same as being submerged in the story as a first-person experiencer. And being submerged as a first-person experiencer is very much an empowered situation. And when I talk about what it was like when consciousnesses ascended in the time before death was a thing, everybody who ascended and who followed the sun on these daily circles and cycles through the sky is still influencing time. You still care about time, but you're not a first-person experiencer anymore. But can you understand, like, even if you are not listening to the symphony, you can still care about the music that the symphony is playing. You're like a creator, stagehand, creating parts of the beauty of reality, creating parts of the show of reality, but not necessarily being in the audience, having the experience of being like in the opera house, looking at all of these things, but you still care about the beauty of the opera that you're creating. That is very much what life is like for me as Aurora, non-embodied and without using DNA, as a participant in the symphony of life and the symphony of time, caring about it profoundly, adding to its structure, safeguarding its perfection, but not necessarily being submerged in it. And then also me being submerged in it here, where I'm like, oh, I'm a first-person experiencer, and I really care about whether that house is being painted purple, and it is not merely an abstraction to me. Melissa goes on to say, my 11-year-old son passed after a family trip car accident over 15 years ago. I'm very sorry for your loss, Melissa. And she says, and I put myself on a journey ever since to figure out how to deal and heal. I was totally feeling the unfairness, guilt, hurt, anger, and more. You're the only one, Aurora, who offered info which actually helped my dealing and healing to actually happen. Real healing, I think, requires some real truthful information, at least for me. That's so beautiful. It's beautiful sharing. I'm very pleased that the perspectives that I can share with you about the structure of the true nature of reality have been able to help like enzymatically digest the very, very difficult and traumatic experience of losing your son. Like losing, he's 11 years old, and then not having this person there in your life that you would expect to have there going forward. And I think that of the traumas that we experience in this world as it is currently shaped, that can be one of the most difficult things that really can bring a person into questioning the existence of God or the existence of life itself or the structure of the cosmos. Like, if that can happen, how can that happen? Why does that happen? What is the purpose for that happening? Why didn't somebody or something stop that? Why did many of these unfair things happen? Like parent losing their child in that sense, I think is one of the ultimate traumas that shakes one to the foundation of wondering, like, what is life about if something like that can happen? And I'm very pleased if the concept that there is a focusing of awareness when consciousness dies. In fact, this is called refinery of light, refinery of personality characteristics. That's what this particular lesson is. Everything about this shape is about moving from the general to the specific. Like a lens where at first everything is blurry and you can't really see, and then focusing it to the very, very clear, essential, sharp image of light waves that fit together that gives us the true vision of what reality is. The truest thing I can tell all of you is that the areas where people die, that's actually all the blurry periphery of reality. That all of the timelines that end in death, all the times when you get smashed on the highway or your cat gets run over by a car, and my cat was a family member to me, or anybody that you love dies, those are the peripheral realities that we actually were never intended to experience firsthand or drive down those time roads. So in ancient Atlantis, before we ever experienced death, we did many things that would be considered death-defying. You might be whatever, climbing a mountain, hanging from your pinky off of a giant cliff, dangling dangerously. Some of these things that daredevil extreme sports enthusiasts do right now. But you did not ever die. And we're never afraid of dying because you could see that clearly. Well, if I move my pinky like this, then I will plummet to my death, but I'm not going to move my pinky that way. I'm going to stay here doing this. And there was an incredible amount of freedom that happened from being able to move through any experience or event, knowing that there is a pathway that is a pathway of continued life. It's not merely about the likelihood of danger. Like there's a likelihood that you could fall off of the cliff, or there's a likelihood that a rock could break, or there's a likelihood that you will fall over your shoelace and plummet to your death. There are probabilities. This is a probability structure. It tells us what things can happen and how likely are they to happen. But in the truthfulness of the structure of time, the areas where we die are actually the most likely, but the least truthful. There are many, many timelines where you die. And the timeline where you do not die, that path of least likelihood, it is the least likely. It's like if it was a lottery ticket, it would be, well, 1 to 10 million billion trillion chance of actually winning. But your success, your winning, is inevitable. You know that you've got the winning ticket. Every single one of us has the winning lottery ticket, where there is this inevitable level of reality where we play every single right note, where we not only don't fall off a cliff, we don't die in a motorcycle accident. We don't eat poisoned food. We don't do this. We don't do that. We do everything exactly right. And I'm talking mostly about like avoiding accidents and injury. Staying alive also includes so much of the positive, healing, loving, and nourishing activities that we do to others. So staying alive is not only being guided by this inner apparatus that tells us, don't fall over here, don't fall off a cliff, don't get smashed up on the highway, but it also tells us, go here and give charitably to this person, or go here and tell this person this, here's a kind word. The things that actually give you eternal life are the loving, compassionate, amazing activities and words that you have done in your life. You get it? Like I told you, you might have been having lunch with your friend who never pays for lunch. That's not the eternal definition characteristic of their life. The fact that they said something that they cared about you, that is what resonates for eternity. So we can live without fear in the knowing of ourselves as eternal beings. When we do these things that are eternal activities, and the eternal activity, like I said, could be saying the right word at just the right time that completely transforms a person's life or heals them in some way. It can also be doing something that it might be casual to you, but is deep and profound to others in terms of helping them on their life journey. It is the indelible nature of love that continues to reverberate even after you are no longer in the physical world. And it can also be creating an object or a performance of astounding beauty. Like, you know, if someone creates a painting or a sculpture or a musical performance, that artistry in its purity of the moment can last eternally as the defining characteristic of who you are. Whether or not you paid for lunch is definitely secondary by the wayside. That's not the defining characteristic of who you are. And that these activities are literally what ends up having, like a gong, the endless reverberation through time, I want to say good stuff, the valuable, long-lasting, coherent signals that you have sent out as heart signals, as feelings, as truthful expression of divine intelligence. That's the stuff that stays for forever. So when we think of those who have gone, who have died or passed on, or they're in a different parallel timeline or reality, the stuff of them that lasts forever, or what do you bring through a portal, like when you travel through the sun as an expert who does star travel, the stuff that lasts for forever is the untarnished, the love, the love. So love as love tone is also defined as pure signal strength. In the notes from 10 years ago, I talk about when you eat, you should be a taste bud on the tongue of God, and you should be broadcasting a very, very clear memory to the sun in real time of what you are experiencing, like this apple tastes so good, or whatever you're eating, but also creating a remembrance for yourself for the time when you will not have a physical body any longer. And that's very big. I talked to you about my epic fried chicken, but it can be whatever is your thing. Like when you ate that almond croissant and you just imprinted on every aspect of the taste, texture, and the moment that you were in as you ate it. And you will at a certain point have your consciousness, but you're not going to have a physical body, and you're not going to have a mouth and croissants to eat. And that's, we must recognize that this is a temporal aspect of ourselves in being here and in ingesting food, but we don't wish to make it something that is burdensome or choreful. We wish to make it something that, according to the brochure, it was always meant to be. It's always meant to be an amazing exploration of individuation and the feelings and flavors that we can experience by being here, not something that was meant to be like a chorefulness or a violence against other organisms, where we must eat to survive, and I must kill the almond croissant in order to stay alive. I joke, but like the laws of the jungle and having to kill another organism to eat it to stay alive. What we are really doing here is accumulating experiences that are eternal experiences. So sometimes the eternal experience is like eating the most amazing thing. Sometimes the eternal experience is hugging someone that you really love, or my little dog is right underneath my table here. I have a lot of beautiful memories in my memory bank of the love that I share hugging her. And also just when we go out for our little walks, I should say WALKs, but you know what I'm talking about. Walk on the bike path, these moments where we're kind of like going along, beautiful day, the sun is shining. I imprint upon those moments. Those are absolutely like these priceless, it's the treasure that you came here for. Those eternal remembrances are the treasure that you came here for. And I'm happy that I'm giving verbal energy equal or greater to that than the stuff that I talked about earlier in this class, which are all of the distractors. Basically, those entities and their hijinks and the things that they try to do to us, the living experiencers, try to take us away from our sensorium of what we are experiencing in the profundity of the present moment now, that it in many ways robs us of our eternal experience. And it also robs us of the immediacy of our rapport with the sun and the stars that's right out there, that we should always be in this immediate loving relationship where the sun and the stars are like, yep, I know exactly what's going on with you. Like, you didn't even have to say a word. I just saw it, the whole thing happen, saw it. But that due to genetic diminishments and the implantation of verbalization, that often humans are not live streaming enough. But that's also, I think, part of the inadequacy of what I was teaching. Hold on one sec, hold on. In the recording from 10 years ago, I was talking about like, yeah, just stay completely focused on the moment now, focus on the taste and textures of your food. Don't go into anger, hatred, sadness, recrimination, blame, and guilt. And, that is all like, that's wise, good advice. That's kind of generic. And that's like saying, yep, like the secret to weight loss is like, to get more exercise and eat fewer calories. It's like, Aurora, like it's sometimes a little bit more complex than that. So, because in the lessons from 10 years ago, I talk about how basically these putis are fatty blockages, just as you might have fatty blockages in your own body. And the solution in your own body is to go into the emotional storage, take those things out of storage, resolve them, and then be able to have the blood flow through your arteries and the energy flow through your lymphatic system effectively. This is what we want to happen in the time field. We want to remove any consciousness blockages or residues that would be considered unresolved pain of the cosmos. And all of this is still apt. Yes, the putis and those blockades and their entire economy that keeps them not falling into entropy are aspects of unresolved pain signals in the cosmos. But the thing that has not been acknowledged is maybe in free will, they are choosing to stay in pain, which is something, that's my dog barking, sorry. The question of whether there are some entities doing their math homework wrong on purpose, whether they might have levels of profound self-destruction where they don't want themselves as pain signals to get resolved. What if that's what's going on with them? What if instead of being like, oh, my mistake, I find myself here on the membrane of death, I've done something wrong, I should resolve all this trauma and then go into a state of peacefulness? What if they're like, I am my pain and I'm going to keep on identifying with my pain and it's never going to get healed and it's going to be an endless pain blockage, an endless, throbbing pain signal in the cosmos for forever. What if that's what's going on? This is the much more sophisticated and truthful sharing that I have with you for this moment, because I think that it was facile and reductionist for me to be like, oh, like they all just should go into peacefulness and then they won't be in pain anymore. And because that's, of course, what I would be like and what I would wish for everything. And that is everything that my life as Flying Rainbow Lasagna is here to exemplify and make a pathway for. You don't have to suffer anymore. You can go into a state of entropy, which is again different than the sense of some theological necessity of a lake of fire where something's going to burn for forever. Cheeky, don't be upset, girl. Don't be upset. Don't be upset. We're going to hug her in a minute. No. But I want to open the floor to any more questions or comments, and I want to make sure that I got through everything that is important. I'm sorry if my dog is barking a lot. Hold on 1 second. Cheeky. Okay, because in my notes, basically what I talk about is a lot of the beautiful things that I talk about in Path of Light, the sun as consciousness and solar emanations as being consciousness. You are a refinery of consciousness and you're part of a biofeedback loop with the sun and the stars, that you and your intestines and photosynthesis are all beautiful partners in this giant biofeedback loop. And I love teaching about photosynthesis in Path of Light. And I get into how this is part of the warping and twisting and deformation of the fabric of space-time and consciousness, little tiny gravity wells. I love talking about all of that and looking at life on those levels of abstraction and the perfection of life at that state. And all of that still stands. You as refinery of consciousness, and you as refining outward from like a metal, refining impurities out of yourself in the same way that metals are refined in a forge or smelting area of whatever, making metals and metal objects. You are removing impurities from yourself and you are becoming more crystalline, stronger, and well-formed as those impurities are removed. All of that still stands. Pedro says, a Putin must be making cheeky bark. You know something I will tell you guys. My dog is super energetically sensitive and she senses all of these things more than merely whether there's like a car or a truck or a motorcycle or a person or something like that. She senses all of these things, including whether I am under energy attack, whether there are frequency assaults, whether there are negative ghosts or parasites or anything like that. She's totally tuned into that. So I have definitely learned to recognize and validate what her barkiness is not just the mere barkiness of, a little dog that's feeling upset. She's often telling me important stuff, but also I'm usually asking her to be able to give me the time that I need to be able to make these recordings so that, yeah, there we go. We're going to send it to entropy. So what does the process of sending something that is a negative consciousness residue, what would that look like? What does sending it to entropy look like? So on the one hand, simplistically, I say, like, just don't feed it. Just don't feed it. Don't feed it with your energy. Don't feed it with your food. Don't feed it with your attention. Definitely don't talk to it. But sometimes it's like, I'm still right here in front of you. Like, in basketball, like I'm running interference. I'm right in front of you. You're never going to get past me. I'm doing it anyway. And it's essential to, when it is attempting to block you or be in your path, take energy from it. And that would be like taking something that has some amount of heat or energy in it and making it very cold, taking your energy back. I think of it almost like a big vacuum cleaner or a shop vac, where I'm like vacuuming back, taking all of my emotional energy, all energy of consciousness and awareness from that item, consciousness, thing, or characteristic, and making it go into a state that is colder and colder and slower and slower. And the idea is that entropy is a state that is no longer in time, because this conversation here has been an amazing conversation, really, really good, sophisticated conversation. Sorry about the barking, about what propels us through time. Cheeky enough, thank you. Cheeky, thank you. What propels us through time? DNA and the actions of DNA propel us through time. Yes. Cheeky, look, enough. I got to do my work. Please don't be loud. Okay, thank you. DNA propels us through time, but things that are not supposed to be alive or aware or in existence are supposed to be in entropy entropy is not being in time. When you are in entropy, you are not moving. You are frozen. You are not moving on a molecular level, and you are not moving through time from moment 1 to moment 2 to moment 3 to moment anything. You don't exist anymore. So a beautiful envisionment that you can do for all of us in wondering, what would planetary ascension look like? What would this moment of ascension look like? Everything that is not supposed to be in existence would go into an instant state of entropy or non-existence and would not move with us forward through time from that moment onward. So if it is at 4:32 p.m. that we all of a sudden ascended, and the things that have longevity and coherence in terms of who we are, personality characteristics, and our true heart, every single one of those things that is not supposed to be in existence would instantaneously go out of existence and would never travel with us through time again. Any person, any personality characteristic, any organism, any entity, and anything that they have been using, utilizing, upholding, or making happen in reality would instantaneously cease to be in existence. And as we move forward now, it's 4:33. And guess what? The only things that come with us into 4:33 are things that are of pure love, things that are supposed to be in existence, things that are part of divine perfection, that are part of divine intelligence, and that are part of the divine plan. And when I talk about the divine plan, please never be fooled by putis who will come forward and say, we're part of the divine plan. We're here as your teachers and we're necessary and didactic. I'm making a crazy face. That you must never believe. Cancer is not your teacher. Evil is not your teacher. The destructions and the distortions to this pristine system is the antithesis of necessary or didactic. It does not make you great. It does not teach you anything in any way. Do you understand? Everything about me being here is about me saying, I'm not just going to ascend myself and then be like, see ya, losers, I made it through the drain catcher, but you're all stuck like greasy macaroni down there. I would never do that. And everything that I'm here telling you about is basically about the aspects of this system that are completely wrong, flawed, and not the way that they are actually supposed to be, so that you don't internalize it as somehow your own personal flaw. Like, how come that guy ascended up there? How come I didn't ascend? I guess there's something wrong with me. I'm left behind. I'm not good enough. No, that's not truthful either. Everything that I'm giving you here in terms of truth in this teaching is meant to be empowering to you, so that you can know and comprehend how profoundly flawed this system is, and how unfair it is, and how much it has not been up until this point a meritocracy, and how the simplistic recipe that I gave to you in the recorded lessons is in many ways very unfair or incomplete. Without me giving this live lecture here, that I would be doing something very unfair to you guys. That the fairest thing to say is that there is a huge backlog of unenforced cosmic law, a huge backlog of injustice, the things that I've characterized as stuck emotional energy that simply needs to be healed and then sent on its journey of consciousness as it's flowing, is really secondary to the sense of an entire system of cosmic justice that has been denied and delayed for an incredibly long amount of time. It has created a backlog, as I said, of injustice and a huge amount of suffering that must be recognized. So the hot tub from hell does not take responsibility for itself or for its systemic injustices. Guess what? Justice and the overarching time, animal, and cosmic law as a good thing must take responsibility for itself, its own malformations or inadequacies. And one of the things that I said in my Flying Rainbow Lasagna manifesto is that the Flying Rainbow Lasagna is the latest augmentation or the latest layer of truth that doesn't come into conflict with any of the other previously established levels of cosmic truth, that the universe or the cosmos augments itself by necessity, and that these new cosmic laws are created and then put into enforcement in response to any of the other perceived inadequacies or incompletenesses of cosmic law structure up until that point. How can any of this bad stuff, I want to say BS, be going on if cosmic law is a thing? Cosmic law is a thing, but it was incomplete. And that those incomplete levels of cosmic law doesn't mean that you should throw out the entire cosmic law framework. You should say, if A is B and B is C and C is D and A is D and all that stuff fits and that's right and 1 + 1 = 2, but look at the world and the way that all these things are being effed up. We need to write a new law that responds to all of these other things, and even the sense of how can the membrane of death be hijacked? Because you know something, I'm kind of dancing around it and we'll just say it. They didn't get there by accident. They're not just pain signals that got there by accident. If you died, you would be a person who got there by accident. You're not a person who created a crap time machine or a planetary artificial Merkaba on purpose to be like, let me smear myself on the membrane of death in an unfixable way on purpose, which is what they did. You get it? They smashed their guitars on stage. They destroyed themselves in time using a crap time machine. They are not only not at peace, they are hovering endlessly because they can't go to peace. And then they will put themselves forward as poor me, the ultimate victim. Wah, wah, it's not my fault, even though it's totally their fault, totally their responsibility. And now this speaks to, just very briefly, and I will wrap it up and take Tiki for some exercise, celebrities and persons of notoriety in our present world. Maybe they might be Hollywood actors or government agents who chose to get into the clone chambers. And the clone chambers, like I said, vaporize the original. When you vaporize the original physical biological form that was born from the mother's womb, you are dead. They are dead. They are in a sense of no longer occupying the land of the living, but their consciousness is still tethered to their clone forms, which are these adult forms that carry their consciousness around. And if you killed all of their clone forms, guess what? They would not go to peace, and they would not go on their soul journey, and they would not have their wonderful life review, which they should have. They would be hovering around, floating around, and waiting for the next container that they could somehow get into in order to exploit DNA. So the leaky gut of having consciousnesses traveling down the time field in exploiting DNA and not coming to any levels of personal resolution is, first of all, it's an affront to the entirety of time. Time is an alive animal, and this is a disease that is happening through time. It is an affront to DNA. DNA is so grand in its scale that I don't think human consciousness can even comprehend it, but it is so vast across such large levels of time, space, and carries so much information that for some little self-serving stupid thing that comes along and says, oh, I want to avoid life review. I want to kill a bunch of people like a sociopath and then not have to feel bad about it. And I'm going to somehow hide in a closet, and the closet's called DNA, and hope that no one's going to find me in the nooks and crannies, is patently ridiculous. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? That one little tiny, it's like one little tiny stupid mouse that's like, oh, I want to hide in the nook and crannies so I'll never face accountability for my personal crimes. And that is somehow going to destroy the entirety and destabilize the entirety of all life everywhere because it wants to hide in the nooks and crannies. Totally, like, that's an unfunny farce that would be going on. And then basically how this relates to you and your personal journey. Your response as a responsible galactic citizen or galactic citizen in training can never be, I'm just going to fix things for myself. I'm just going to get myself out of here and just leave behind a corrupt garbage heap, but I'll get somewhere. I'll get to somewhere better. That is actually not what citizens of heaven do. Do you get it? Citizens of heaven do not sit around in heaven being like, I'm doing the backstroke. It's so comfortable here in heaven. Pass me another strawberry. Oh, It's delightful up here. Oh, they really are suffering down there. Well, don't worry. Give me another strawberry. Let's not do anything about it. That is not what citizens of heaven do. Citizens of heaven are like, that is effed up. That is against cosmic law. That is totally unacceptable. And I have to do something about it because it affects the entirety of life, the entirety of consciousness, the entirety of time. It affects God. This is something that affects all of us. And that is what I did as consciousness that is in a higher dimensional viewpoint. Now, Pedro says, I just thought that putis are like shadows. We take away the energy, light, and they're gone. This is the problem. I think not a problem with you, Pedro, but I think a problem with the conception of what is New Age shadow work and the putis being the natural and didactic shadow form of your true presence. Like if my true personality is generosity, then the inverted negative shadow form would be generosity to the point that like you give everything away to others and have nothing for yourself. This is all very simplistic. That's not what is going on at all. The things that we are experiencing as shadow and as putis are not your negative inverted personality characteristics. Please don't hug and kiss a demon, and please don't identify with the demon and a demonic presence as if it is an outgrowth or an aspect of your true personality. It's not. It's actually not. You know, these power abusing intelligence agents that they might be FBI, CIA, KGB, whatever they are as their earthly intelligence agents, they're basically, you know, power abusing bullies that extend their consciousness artificially into the astral realm. They have absolutely nothing to do with who you are. Isn't that freeing? Can you imagine the backbends and grotesque twistedness that you would have to put yourself into in order to be like, oh yes, somehow that piece of SHIT is an outgrowth of my soul and is doing that because of something that I am doing and is a reflection of me. It's actually not. It actually is a grotesque monster, and it is a mockery of your own efforts at transpersonal growth and personal perspective to try to work their existence into the narrative of your perspective of the truthfulness of you coming to greater levels of self-love and compassion and awareness. It's not. That's why I call them SHIT and poop and other things like this. This is not necessary, not didactic, not food, not anything that has anything to do with you learning. You are actually not here to learn from them. They are not your shadow selves. And I actually, if I'm totally honest about it, despise what people call shadow work, as I feel it is a horrific, twisted, and inadequate re-victimization of people who are already psychologically victimized to then identify with the things that are victimizing them or harming them as if they're aspects and outgrowths of their own self. No, actually, you're not punching yourself in the face, and you're not bullying yourself, and you're not raping your own planet, and you're not spraying chemtrails in your own face, and you're not destroying your own genetic code. And all of those assertions otherwise are personally offensive to me. And that is also why I am here and why I do videos like this, because I don't want you to be fooled by this horrific negative advertising. These are lies that are both corrosive and pernicious, and that they harm you on your journey of self-awareness in the necessity of trying to identify with or encapsulate something that has nothing at all to do with you as if it has to do with you. Someone else made a crap time machine and smeared their own consciousness inexorably around the singularity, and they can't get home from it, and they want to stand there and say that somehow they've got something to teach you about yourself. F that, SHIT. These are lies, and like I said, they are corrosive and pernicious lies, meaning that being exposed to them eats away at your soul, at the truthfulness of whom you are. That those things are not like aspects of humanity and I have to love them. No, please F that, SHIT. No, no on every level. This is very big because the rejection extends to those whom are physically embodied, who are containers for negative consciousnesses from the hot tub from hell, some of whom are voluntarily do that. They're like, woohoo, come on in, hot tub from hell demons, act through me, I'll be empowered. And they do this. and they do this as government agents, and they do this as military personnel, and they do this as intelligence agents, and they do this as extremely crappy, low-level pathogens that are part of dark magic societies. And they get a sense of empowerment off of it. And then they say, I didn't stab those people. It was the demons acting through me. And now those demons are back in the hot tub from hell. Forgive me, forgive me. And like, no, actually, that has absolutely, that person, their activities and everything that they've done has absolutely zero to do with you and your shadow presence. All right. One of the biggest takeaways, and you remember my voice and my fierce passion as I told you this, when you get into true, real levels of authenticity and truth, when you really look back on this, you'll be like, wow, I didn't have anything to learn from that. It was 100% lies. What I had to learn was what it is like to navigate in an environment of 100% lies, how not to internalize lies as truth, how to fully reject those lies and those liars as having absolutely zero to do with me, as opposed to being emanations from me. So this whole idea of shadow work is in many ways horrific and disgusting to me. And you know what shadow work really means is these things that are lies, liars, entities who have exploited time and extended temporarily their own existence by being smeared on the membrane of time. You know what they want to do? They want to live in you. And their flawed, inadequate, totally unjustifiable shadow work, quote unquote, means that you embrace them as if they are self. You're like, oh, power abusing intelligence agent, you really are the negative inversion of who I am. Come be inside of me. Kumbaya, poop, kumbaya. I hope you can tell that I'm angry and I'm also being facetious. So no, there's no kumbaya. There's no allowing these disgusting shadow entities to live inside of you. That is what is corrosive to your soul, is the sense that you will only be free of their negative influences in your life. They're like, yeah, we'll stop poking you with demonic interference if you'll just falsely accept us into your definition of self. And then we can hijack your soul and ride along with you. And then they'll stop making your life hard. Do you get it? That's disgusting to me. That makes me unbelievably, righteously angry, appropriately angry. I would be a stupid, brain-dead, moron, inadequate loser of galactic scale if I didn't get angry at that. And that is not the same as don't make anger food for these things because they'll feed off of you. Do you understand? My anger is justified, and it is wrathful, and it is white hot, and it creates a boundary that I express through these words to you that you will remember. And you'll be like, I'm not gonna hug and kiss some filthy, demonic, invalid crap and corruption as if it is a piece of me, and that none of that has to do with unity consciousness. They lie in the most horrific and diseased ways, and don't agree to any of these lies. Atom is hopping off, says thank you everyone, and thanks Professor Aurora for clarifying, and Divine, as always, you're quite welcome. Thank you. I know I got a little wrathful here at the end. Pedro says, if there is a backlog, is there a specific place or time to rectify, like the game of sticks that you remove one and nothing moves, but you remove a key one and they all fall down? The Jenga tower. We're there. We're pretty much there. The Jenga tower of events and causality, meaning this thing happened because of this thing, is teetering so much and is so ponderous that reality structure cannot be upheld anymore. And you can't just be like, let's just fabricate a few more lies and keep reality structure going on a little bit longer. And the lies that are upheld are lies about government, about power. When I talk about military and intelligence and secret societies and religion, what I'm really talking about is earthly power structure. Who's in charge, who is empowered over others, and whom should we be allowing to be empowered over us? And economics, social dynamics, government dynamics, economic dynamics. This is everything that everyone recognizes and talks about in terms of quote unquote the matrix or the false reality structure, teetering ponderously for a very long amount of time. And now at this point, they cannot insert any more structural lies to make up for their deficits of lies. And that, yes, the aspect of your own empowerment in dismantling this whole entire thing it does relate to your own observership and your own sense of personal empowerment. I'm God and I'm creating all this stuff. Yes, you are, but that is what has been weaponized against you in this pernicious shadow work. It says you're God, you created all these things in the membrane of death, and you're God, and you created all these characteristics that are actually outgrowths of you. But then we really have to get to this. It is possible for there to be something that is non-God. At God, here's the 0th dimension. And here's all the stuff that recognized and decided it's not God and it doesn't belong at infinity. And it decided a very, very long time ago to go away from God and to go into entropy. And the truth is, it didn't get banished from heaven. It's not poor, poor me. We shouldn't pity it. It actually made a very good positive choice that somehow got 180-degree diametrically mixed up and then tried to sustain itself off of energy, but simply needs to be reminded that it belongs in entropy and is non-God and should not be in existence. And that is the entirety of what we're experiencing here. You could say this is God's shadow work, and God is recognizing not 100% of what I see here is me, and not 100% of what I see here I should identify with. And some of the stuff that is here, not only should I disidentify with it, I should disidentify with it to the point of it going out of existence. And when you do that, that's actually flying rainbow lasagna. That is the joyful activity that is known as flying rainbow lasagna. Some of the personality characteristics that you contain are longevity, and they go onward to entropy, to energy rather. And some aspects that have been within you go to entropy. You know what goes to entropy? Pardon me for saying it. Your effing addictions, and alcoholism and substance abuse. That's not you. That's not any aspect of whom you really are. Those are things that are negative entities that try to live through you. And same with so much of this. Anger, I shouldn't say anger, but hatred, like hatred of others, diminishment of others, so many things that aren't the real you, but that shadow work requires someone to agree to under torture and coercion. Do you know what a coerced confession is? That's when they stick bamboo shoots or whatever underneath your fingernails, beat you and rape you horribly. They say, now sign the confession. That is called a confession under torture and coercion. That is what shadow work is. Shadow, these are these invalid presences that have literally nothing effing to do with you, that stick torture devices into you until they say, identify with me, say I'm you, say I'm you, say I'm you, say I'm you, and I'll stop torturing you. And that's all it takes. Be like, okay, fine, you're me, you're an aspect of me, stop torturing me. That's it. And then as soon as you say you're an aspect of me, they ride along inside of you. They're not an aspect of you, and they're not an aspect of God, and they're not anything that should actually be in existence. And guess what? They hate my effing guts for saying this to you, for being whatever, for having the temerity to actually dare to say this to you, instead of being a new age teacher who says, do your shadow work and then your demons will become your best friends. F that. Please do not do that. Please kick the demons out of your genetic code, out of your mind, out of the interstices, out of your world, out of your economy, out of your government, out of your religious structures, out of every aspect of being. Please don't look at them as if they're your teachers. Cancer is not your teacher. You're not learning anything from these military and power abusers. You're not learning anything from whatever, the galactic alliance of space mafia losers. You're not learning anything from these pathogens. They're just pathogens. They're just poop. They are just interested in eating and feeding off of you. You're not learning anything from them. That is one of the most pernicious and corrosive lies they try to get you to agree to. Don't agree to it. And that's the real sovereignty, is in the acts of what you do and do not agree to in terms of a contextual premise. So when something comes along and it's like, I'm your teacher, like, no, you're not, get the F out. That is you in sovereignty. You do not agree to it being your teacher. You're like, no, you're an interloper and a hijacker and a vagrant and a homeless person and the unrestful dead and it's definitely not an ascension teacher. And let me also tell you this, every single one of these things that resides on the membrane of death, including some kind of yoga teacher that might have lived whatever 10,000 years ago, if they didn't ascend, they are not in a place to help you to ascend. You can only teach what you know. If you died, you can teach others how to die. But if you have ascended, that is what you can model and be a template for others. So let's say that there might even be some of these occupiers of the interstices that have lived there for a long time, and they might say, we're good, we're this, we're that. If they died, if they don't have a coherent love frequency, if they don't actually know how to ascend, then you know what they are, nothing more than thought forms who once might have been humans and are so in love with their own spiritual egotism and definition of self at having been a success from the spiritual practices that they did during life, that they're holding on up here and drawing upon your life force energy in terms of your belief and recognition of them. Oh, teach me, teach me, teach me how to ascend. They didn't ascend. If they died and they're on the membrane of death and they purport to be more spiritually advanced than you are, then they are nothing more than energy harvesters. I know, you know something, this has been a very long 3 hours that I feel like is not that positive, that I usually try to be super duper positive and moving in a good direction and then ending on wonderful feelings of love. This one was not very positive. Pedro says, great lesson today. Thank you for that. I needed to hear that. Even if I missed almost all of the first hour, I'll catch the replay. Love the lasagna. Thank you for that, Pedro, because my own feelings, like I always try to bring this around to something that is the most energizing and uplifting. And I try not to turn something into just a complaint fest. And but I felt like I had to do that in what I was sharing today. And I felt like, again, I hope that this shows the true person that I am, because I'm never going to give you like the stupid, disingenuous, naive teaching that might be very might seem very comfortable and might seem very la-di-da, spiritual, whatever, perfect. It might be something that seems like it's not rocking the boat and might feel very comforting. I might give you the hard stuff. I think today I gave you a lot of hard stuff, but I hope that that speaks volumes for who I am. I'm going to give you the truth and not disempower you with saccharine reassurances about what is going on. So the real truth is that, yes, like, you know, eat your food mindfully, practice all these different forms of meditation, don't allow these negative thought forms to feed off of you and everything like that, and so much more. And so much more in terms of spiritual attainment. How do you fight these things out of our planet? 5G masts outside of your window. Like, yes, you're going to have to practice spiritual attainment, but we are going to have to do something even more effective and even more direct in terms of the present situation of what is going on. That I think it would be too reductionist, too facile, and too simplistic to just say, do your shadow work, take responsibility for your emanations. You are God and you created all of this. And it's like that, although these are truthfulnesses that you are God and you've created all of this, some things are part of the previous regime that as you are coming into your abilities as God, you didn't create them. Somebody else created them. Somehow they ended up being here, but you'll get to respond to them in terms of uncreating them. And you don't have to keep these things around. You'll remember this too. When you become empowered, you can be like, should I restructure reality and get rid of all these fears that are out of place, things that occupy the membrane of death when nothing should be there, and things that are not genuine shadow realm, or should I keep them there as impediments to learning? You're going to be like, I'm going to get rid of those things as they are completely impediments to the real functionality of the system and to the real learning that should be going on here. And I would, as an empowered ascended master being, never keep them around, because that would be like saying, I'm just going to ascend and bring myself to someplace nice and comfortable, and you can all, next generation, navigate the existing garbage heap of unfairnesses and to get through it all somehow. Okay, I feel like this was a giant long rant. I hope that you guys bore it well. And that Pedro says, we need the good, the bad, and the ugly teachings good. I'm so pleased to hear that. I don't go to the doctor so he can tell me I have a very nice shade of green on my foot, but to tell me that there is some disease to my foot and the cure he will give me. I'm very much that right now. So thank you for that recognition that, yes, I'm giving the very undesired diagnosis of what is actually going on in our world, because I think that we need so much more than just hopefulness or generalities in terms of spiritual practice. I'm actually criticizing myself from 10 years ago, but also what I did then and my viewpoint then was appropriate for that time. And I love the teachings that I give that are part of this idealized naivete, but I also really recognize from my experiences and from what our world is shaped like right now, that it's necessary to do so much more. So I think that you have to not only not produce the food that they eat in terms of their negativity and the things that sustain them on the membrane of death, I think that you have to completely remove that food from reality. And that is something that is an ongoing activity. So it used to be, yeah, here's the difference. Me saying to you, just maintain your own personal energy boundaries. If we all did this, they would all starve. But what you could do is we would all do this and they'd be like, all those people are maintaining their own personality and energy boundaries. Let's put a bunch of 5G and nano wetware into them and destabilize them and get food off of them. So because they have done all of those things, we have to actually act much more effectively. This is about more than just like, I'm just going to maintain my energy boundaries and then they're all going to get starved out and then somehow just go down into their starvation modes. I think that actually something even more effective needs to happen in terms of removing all of their food from existence everywhere across all times and across all dimensionalities, and not allowing them to have access to energy or to bite food in any way or to eat or access food in any way. Because again, once you start to see the truth of the things that I'm talking to you about, they didn't end up there by accident. They've been sustaining themselves there through these unconscionable practices for a very long amount of time. And it's not just a question of informing them like, oh, my mistake, I guess you were doing it wrong all along. Oh, well, you better change and do it better now. They've been there very intentionally. So this is a different approach of what needs to happen. Okay, please, any more questions or comments? Otherwise, I will end this rant. Please just reassure me that this is a valuable level of energy for me to share with you. But because I always, like I said, try to end on something more positive, but I hope that this was just a very effective sharing for today. Pedro says more rants. You guys want more rants from me? Good. I will continue to rant further. All right. I think that I will wrap up the recording for right now. My profound thanks to everyone who watches these videos, is able to come here, be a part of my class live, and people who catch things in the archive. And I thank you for tuning in and attenuating to these ideas and eating and ingesting this truthfulness of what I share with you, as I am absolutely authentically sharing from my heart the ideas and energy that sustain me, that come from the sun and the stars. And I will never lie to you or give you the sugar-coated hopium. I will tell you the truth of how I really see things and what I really think is effective in terms of the spiritual ongoing battle and warfare that we have been engaged in. So thank you for tuning in, and thank you for your strength, and thank you for your efforts for your own personal healing and rectification and uplifting of time and of consciousness, and for all of us. Thank you. I really want to end on something encouraging. Like, I want to thank you guys for what you're doing, and for you to know that there is a pathway. There is a pathway out of chaos and a pathway to freedom for each one of us, and for the rectification of this entire system to be restructured to what it is actually supposed to be. Thank you.